My daughter sent me a text message that stopped my heart cold. Dad, Darian says you cannot come to Italy with us. This trip is for family only. You understand, right? I stood there staring at my phone screen, my thumb hovering over a notification from my bank showing a transfer of $100,000 I had sent them just last week. $100,000 to build a suite for me in their new house, a house I paid the down payment for. And now I wasn't family. I was just an ATM that had served its purpose. I didn't reply. I didn't call to beg. I simply looked up at the travel agent who was holding my black Amex Centurion card and said two words that would destroy their summer: cancel everything. But before I tell you how I brought their entire world crashing down in less than 24 hours, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been treated like an outsider by the very people you sacrificed your life to raise. My name is Reginald Carter, but everyone calls me Reggie. I am 70 years old, and if you saw me on the street, you wouldn't look twice. I drive a 10-year-old Ford pickup truck. I wear flannel shirts and comfortable work boots. I look like a man who spent his life working hard manual labor and retired with a modest pension. That is exactly what I want people to see. That is exactly what my son-in-law Darian sees. He sees an old black man who got lucky with a little bit of savings, someone simple, someone easy to manipulate. He has no idea who I really am. He has no idea that for 30 years I was a forensic accountant for a Fortune 500 company. My job wasn't just balancing books. My job was hunting down executives who thought they were smarter than the system. I spent decades tracking hidden assets, exposing embezzlers, and finding the truth buried under mountains of lies. I retired with a golden parachute and investments that have compounded quietly into a fortune that would make Darian's eyes pop out of his head. But I never told them. I wanted my daughter Nia to build her own life. I wanted her to find a partner who loved her for her, not for the inheritance she would one day receive. I thought she had found that life. I was standing in the lobby of Luxury Escapes, the most exclusive travel agency in the city. The air smelled of expensive leather and orchid perfume. I was feeling good. Better than good, actually. I was feeling like a father who could finally give his family the world. In my hand, I held my titanium American Express Centurion card. The heavy black metal was warm against my palm. On the desk in front of me lay the itinerary for a dream vacation. 2 weeks in a private villa in Tuscany, business-class flights for 3 private wine tours, and a yacht charter for a day trip to Capri. The total cost was $32,000. It was supposed to be a surprise, a celebration. Last week, Nia had called me crying tears of joy because they had finally closed on their dream home in the suburbs. She told me they were going to renovate the basement into a luxury in-law suite just for me. "Dad, we want you close," she had said. "We want you to be part of our daily lives." Her words had melted the ice that had formed around my heart since my wife Beatrice passed away 5 years ago. I was so touched that I immediately wired them $100,000 to cover the renovation costs. I wanted to make it easy for them. I wanted to show my appreciation. And now I wanted to take them to Italy to celebrate our new future together. The travel agent, a young woman named Sarah with a bright professional smile, was typing furiously on her keyboard. "Mr. Carter, this is going to be magnificent," she said, looking up with a sparkle in her eyes. "I have confirmed the villa. The chef has been booked for your arrival dinner. I just need to swipe your card to finalize the flights." I smiled back, reaching into my pocket to pull out my reading glasses. That is when my phone buzzed against the countertop. I glanced down. It was a text from Nia. I expected a photo of the new house or maybe a question about dinner. Instead, I saw those words. "Dad, you are banned from our Italian vacation. Darian says family only." The room seemed to tilt slightly to the left. I read it again. And then a third time. Family only. The phrase echoed in my mind, bouncing around with a cruel metallic ring. I looked at the itinerary on the desk. 3 tickets. 1 for Nia, 1 for Darian, 1 for me. I had planned to pay for all of it. But they didn't know that yet. They thought they were planning a trip on their own, a trip they couldn't possibly afford without the money I had just given them. I realized with a sickening jolt what was happening. They were using the $100,000, the money I gave them for the renovation. They were using my own money to book a vacation, and they were specifically excluding me from it. Darian, my white son-in-law, who had always looked at me with a mix of tolerance and condescension, had made the call. He didn't want the old black man cramping his style in Europe. He didn't want his friends to see his father-in-law. He wanted the money, but he didn't want the man who earned it. And Nia, my beautiful Nia, the girl I had carried on my shoulders, the girl I had put through college, she had agreed. She had typed those words. She had hit send. She had chosen her husband's prejudice over her father's love. She had relegated me to the status of a donor, a resource, not a father. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, replacing the shock. It was a familiar feeling. It was the same cold focus I used to feel when I found a discrepancy in a ledger the moment I knew someone was stealing. My breathing slowed. My hands stopped shaking. The father in me wanted to cry, but the forensic accountant in me took over. I looked at the date of the transfer on my banking app. 7 days ago. The funds had cleared. The money was gone from my account, but the game was far from over. Sarah, the agent, cleared her throat politely. "Mr. Carter, are you ready to proceed?" I looked at her. I looked at the black card in my hand. It was the key to a world Darian, desperate, wanted to belong to, a world he pretended to be part of with his leased cars and fake watches. I took a deep breath, and the scent of orchids suddenly felt cloying like a funeral home. "I am not going to proceed, Sarah," I said. My voice was steady, calm, devoid of the heartbreak that was tearing me apart inside. "In fact, I need you to do something for me." Sarah paused, her fingers hovering over the card reader. "Oh, did you want to change the dates?" "No," I said. "I want you to cancel the reservation. All of it. The villa, the boat, the chef, and the flights." Sarah looked confused. "But Mr. Carter, the flights were reserved under a non-refundable fare class. If we cancel now, you won't get the money back for the deposit you put down last week." I had already paid $5,000 as a holding deposit. $5,000 of my hard-earned money. I looked her dead in the eye. "I don't care about the refund, Sarah. I want you to cancel the tickets. I want to make sure that those seats are empty. I want to make sure that even if they try to book them again, they are gone. Release them back to the inventory." "But sir," she stammered, clearly unused to clients burning money. "Are you sure?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the mahogany counter. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life. Cancel it. Now." She typed the commands. I watched the screen reflect in her glasses. Delete, delete, delete. With every keystroke, a part of my old life disappeared. The loving father, the doting grandfather-to-be, the safety net. They were being deleted along with the reservation codes. "It is done," Sarah whispered, looking at me with pity. She must have seen something in my face, the shadow of a man who had just been stabbed in the back by his own flesh and blood. "Thank you," I said. I picked up my black card and slid it back into my worn leather wallet. I walked out of the agency and into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. I climbed into my old Ford truck. The leather of the seat was cracked and the engine rattled when I turned the key. Darian hated this truck. He said it lowered the property value when I parked in their driveway. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning the color of ash. I didn't start the car immediately. I sat there staring at the message on my phone. Family only. "Okay, Nia. Okay, Darian. You want family only. You want to draw a line in the sand. Fine." I shifted the truck into gear. I wasn't going home to cry. I was going to the house. The house I paid for. The house where I was supposedly building a suite. I needed to see something. I needed to see if my suspicions were correct. I needed to verify the asset. I drove toward their exclusive gated community, the one where they were the only mixed-race couple, the one where Darian preened like a peacock. I wasn't going there to argue. I wasn't going there to shout. I was going there to collect my fishing gear from the garage, or at least that was the excuse. But really, I was going there to start the audit. And God help them if I found what I thought I was going to find. The forensic accountant was back on the job, and his first target was his own daughter. I pulled my 10-year-old Ford F-150 up to the curb of the house at 404 Oak Creek Drive. The engine sputtered and died, with a heavy metallic clunk that seemed to echo in the pristine silence of the neighborhood. This was a gated community, the kind with manicured lawns that looked like golf courses, and homeowners associations that fined you for leaving your trash cans out 10 minutes too long. My truck looked like a rusted scar on a perfect face. Darian hated it. He had told me once that I should park down the street so the neighbors wouldn't think the gardener had arrived. I ignored him then, and I ignored him now. I sat in the cab for a moment, looking at the house. It was a sprawling colonial with white pillars and black shutters. It was beautiful. It was expensive. And legally speaking, it was mine. They lived there. Their names were on the mailbox. But the promissory note and the deed of trust were locked in a fireproof safe in my apartment across town. I had set up an LLC to purchase the property so they could have the prestige of ownership without the credit check they would have inevitably failed. I was the private lender. They were the tenants who thought they were kings. I wasn't there to evict them, not yet. I told myself I just needed to pick up my fishing gear. I had left my tackle box and my favorite rod in their garage last week when I came over to measure the basement for the renovation. It was a flimsy excuse and I knew it. I really wanted to look them in the eye. I wanted to see if they would say family only to my face. I climbed out of the truck. My boots crunched on the gravel driveway. I walked up the path to the front door. I didn't need a key. I had paid $3,000 for a state-of-the-art biometric security system 6 months ago. I had my own user profile. I was the administrator, or at least I thought I was. I reached out and pressed my thumb against the scanner. I expected the satisfying click of the deadbolt retracting. Instead, the small ring of light around the sensor flashed an angry red. A robotic voice chirped from the speaker. "Access denied." I frowned. I wiped my thumb on my flannel shirt, thinking maybe it was just grease or dust. I pressed it again. Harder this time. Red light. Access denied. User not recognized. The coldness in my chest spread to my stomach. It wasn't a malfunction. Darian had deleted me. He hadn't just banned me from a vacation. He had erased my access to the house I paid for. He had locked me out before they even left for the airport. I didn't pound on the door. I didn't shout. I reached out and pressed the video doorbell. I heard the chime ring deep inside the house. I waited. 10 seconds, 20 seconds. I knew they were home. I could see Darian's BMW in the driveway. Finally, the intercom crackled to life. It wasn't Nia. It was Darian. "Reggie, look, we are a little busy right now." His voice was tinny through the speaker, but the arrogance was crystal clear. "We are hosting a little bon voyage party with some friends. You know how it is. We need to pack. We need to get ready for Italy. It is not a good time for a visit." I stared at the camera lens. I knew he could see me on his phone or the smart fridge screen. "I just need my fishing gear, Darian," I said. My voice was level. "Open the garage." "I cannot do that." Reggie Darian sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. "The garage is full of luggage and supplies. We are really swamped. Just go home. We will call you when we get back from Europe. Maybe bring you a souvenir." The line went dead. He hung up on me. He didn't even have the decency to come to the door. He treated me like a solicitor, like a nuisance, like a dog begging for scraps. I stood on the porch for a moment, looking at the blank lens of the camera. "Go home." That is what he said. But I was home. He was the one trespassing. I stepped off the porch. I didn't go back to my truck. I walked around the side of the house toward the backyard. The grass was wet and soft under my boots. I could hear music now. Jazz. Smooth, expensive jazz. And laughter. The kind of laughter that comes from people who have never had to worry about where their next rent payment is coming from. I reached the edge of the patio. The curtains on the large French doors were drawn, but there was a gap, a sliver of light spilling out onto the limestone pavers. I stepped into the shadows of a large oak tree and peered inside. The living room looked like a page from a lifestyle magazine. Nia was there wearing a silk dress I had never seen before. She was laughing, holding a flute of champagne. But it was Darian who caught my eye. He was standing in the center of the room surrounded by 5 or 6 other men. They were all white. They were all dressed in designer polos and loafers. Darian was holding a bottle of wine. I recognized that bottle instantly. It was a Chateau Margaux 1996. I had bought it at an auction 3 years ago for $1,200. I had given it to them on their wedding day with a note that said, "Save this for your first anniversary." They had been married 6 months. He had popped the cork for a casual Tuesday afternoon party with his buddies. I watched as Darian poured the wine into crystal glasses. He raised his glass high. The other men followed suit. Through the glass, I couldn't hear the exact words, but I saw Darian puff out his chest. He mimicked a hunched posture. He made a face. He pointed toward the front door where I had just been standing. The room erupted in laughter. One of his friends slapped him on the back. Darian grinned that shark-like grin of his. He was mocking me. He was telling them about the old man he had just turned away. He was drinking my $1,200 wine and toasting to his cleverness and cutting me out. Nia wasn't stopping him. She was over by the food table acting like she didn't see it. Or maybe she just didn't care. She was part of the show. She was the trophy wife enjoying the spoils of war. I looked at the wine in Darian's hand. That bottle was an asset. That house was an asset. The furniture they were sitting on was an asset. And right now, I was looking at a room full of liabilities. The forensic accountant in my brain clicked into high gear. I wasn't hurt anymore. The pain had evaporated, leaving behind a clarity that was sharp enough to cut glass. I didn't tap on the window. I didn't storm in and cause a scene. That is what an emotional father would do. That is what a simple man would do. I was neither. I turned my back on the window. I walked back to my truck in the darkening twilight. I climbed in and started the engine. The rattle didn't bother me this time. It sounded like a war drum. I drove away from the house slowly. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. I had the image of Darian holding my wine burned into my retinas. He wanted a family-only trip. He wanted to enjoy the high life without the burden of the man who paid for it. Fine. I reached for my phone on the passenger seat. I didn't call Nia. I opened my contacts and scrolled down to the letter K. Kowalski, my attorney. The shark. It was time to audit the books. It was time to call in the debts. Darian Miller had just toasted to his own destruction, and he didn't even know it. I drove 40 minutes into the city, leaving the suburbs and the false smiles of my family far behind. I didn't go to the small one-bedroom apartment in the working-class district where Nia sends my birthday cards. That place is a decoy, a stage set for the character of Reggie the retiree. Instead, I drove into the underground parking garage of the Meridian Tower, a steel and glass needle piercing the skyline of the financial district. I parked my rusted truck next to a line of Teslas and Mercedes. The valet, a man named Carlos, who has known me for 5 years, didn't bat an eye at my vehicle. He simply nodded respectfully. "Good evening, Mr. Carter," he said. I nodded back and handed him the keys. He knows I tip better than the hedge fund managers on the penthouse floor. I took the private elevator to the 42nd floor. The doors slid open to reveal my sanctuary. It is a 2,000-square-foot condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. The furniture is Italian leather. The art on the walls is real. This is where Reginald Carter, the former director of forensic accounting, actually lives. I walked straight to the master bedroom and slid aside a heavy, abstract painting. Behind it sat a biometric wall safe. I scanned my retina and typed in a 12-digit code. The heavy steel door hissed open. Inside, there were no stacks of cash or gold bars. There were only hard drives. I selected a black, ruggedized laptop, a machine built for processing massive amounts of data without leaving a digital footprint. I carried it to my glass desk and sat down. The leather chair creaked as I leaned back. I closed my eyes for a second. When I opened them, the hurt father was gone. The old man who wanted a fishing trip was gone. In his place sat the auditor, the man who had sent 3 CFOs to federal prison, the man who could track a single dollar through a dozen shell companies in the Cayman Islands. I cracked his knuckles and opened the laptop. It was time to go to work. I connected to my secure server and brought up the banking portal. I didn't need to hack anything. I didn't need to break any laws. I was the one who had opened the joint construction account for Nia and Darian. I was the primary account holder. I had simply given them authorized user access and a debit card so they could pay contractors. They thought it was their money. But in the eyes of the bank, it was still my ledger. I typed in my username and password. The 2-factor authentication pinged my phone. I entered the code. The dashboard loaded with a spinning blue circle. I felt a familiar tightness in my stomach, the predator's instinct that tells you prey is nearby. I clicked on the account labeled Renovation Fund. I had wired $100,000 exactly 7 days ago. I expected to see a balance of maybe $90,000. I expected to see a large deposit to a general contractor, maybe some payments to Home Depot or a lumber yard. Renovation is expensive, but it moves in predictable patterns. You pay a deposit, you buy materials, you pay for labor. The screen refreshed, the numbers stark black against the white background. Current balance, $12.45. I stared at the screen. I didn't blink. I didn't gasp. I just stared. $100,000. Gone. In 7 days. Not 90 days. Not a month. 1 week. It was physically impossible to spend that much on a basement renovation in a week unless they were plating the walls in gold. I clicked on the transaction history. The list populated a digital autopsy of my generosity. I scanned the dates. The money had arrived on Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, the bleeding had started. I looked for the names of contractors. I looked for permits. I looked for architectural firms. There were none. Not a single cent had been paid to anyone who wielded a hammer or a saw. The account hadn't been used to build a suite for an aging father. It had been used as a personal piggy bank for a lifestyle they couldn't afford. I scrolled down, my eyes narrowing. There were dozens of small charges at first. $500 at a high-end steakhouse, $300 at a liquor store, $2,000 at a designer boutique. They were testing the waters. They were seeing if I was watching. When I didn't call, when I didn't scream, they must have assumed I was the senile old fool Darian always treated me like. They got bold. On Wednesday, there was a wire transfer for $45,000. My finger hovered over the line item. The recipient wasn't a construction company. It was labeled Prestige Motorcars of Atlanta. I opened a new tab and typed in the name. It wasn't a supplier of construction vehicles. It was a luxury dealership specializing in European imports. I clicked on their inventory. Porsches, Land Rovers, Maseratis. Darian hadn't built me a room. He had bought himself a car. He had taken nearly half of the money I gave him for my future home and put it into a depreciating asset that he would probably drive to the country club to impress his friends. The friends who were drinking my wine right now. I went back to the bank statement. There was still $50,000 unaccounted for. I found it in a single transaction dated yesterday, a wire transfer to an entity called DM Ventures LLC. I paused. DM Ventures. Darian Miller Ventures. It was clumsy. It was arrogant. It was exactly the kind of mistake an amateur makes. He had transferred half of the renovation budget directly into a shell company he controlled. He was laundering my money. He was moving it out of the joint account where I could see it and into a private account where he thought it would be invisible. I opened the State Business Registry database. It is a public record, but most people don't know how to navigate it efficiently. I do. I typed in DM Ventures LLC. The search results popped up in seconds. The company had been formed 3 days ago. The registered agent was Darian Miller. The business address was a P.O. box in a strip mall 3 towns over. I sat back in my chair. The cold fury in my gut was replaced by a dark satisfaction. This wasn't just ungrateful behavior. This wasn't just a bad financial decision. This was fraud. Wire fraud, embezzlement, theft by deception. They hadn't bought a single bag of cement. They hadn't hired a single plumber. There were no blueprints. There were no permits. The in-law suite was a phantom, a ghost story. They told me to get access to my wallet. They never intended for me to live there. They never intended to take care of me. They took the money, bought a car, and funneled the rest into Darian's pocket to fund God knows what. I looked at the timestamps again. The transfer to DM Ventures happened yesterday. The booking for the Italian vacation happened this morning. They were celebrating the heist. They were going to Italy on my dime to toast their brilliance in swindling the old man. I reached for my phone. I didn't call the police. Not yet. That would be too easy. That would be too quick. Darian wanted to play the big shot. He wanted to be a businessman with his LLC and his luxury car. Fine, I would treat him like a businessman. I would treat him like a hostile entity in a corporate takeover. I picked up a pen and a legal pad. I wrote down the transaction numbers. I wrote down the confirmation codes. I wrote down the VIN number of the car I suspected he bought, tracing it through the dealership's recent sales data, which I accessed through a back-end vulnerability I knew about from a previous audit. I had the evidence. I had the paper trail. But I needed to verify the physical reality. I needed to know exactly what was happening in that basement. If there was even a single stud in the wall, he could claim he started the work. I needed proof that the room was a lie. I closed the laptop with a snap. The screen went black, reflecting my own face. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a man who was about to foreclose on a debt. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. The lights twinkled below, indifferent to my anger. I needed eyes inside that house. I couldn't go back. Darian had made that clear. But I knew someone who could. Mike. Mike the plumber. We had played poker together for 20 years. He was the best in the business, and more importantly, he owed me a favor from when I helped him with a tax audit 3 years ago. I pulled up his number. It was late, but Mike would be up. He was always up. I dialed. Reggie Mike's voice was rough like gravel. "Everything okay?" "No, Mike," I said. "I need you to do a job for me tomorrow morning, a special job." "What kind of job?" "I need you to go to my daughter's house. Tell them there is a leak in the main line that is affecting the neighbors. You need to get into the basement." "The basement?" Mike asked. "What am I looking for?" "I need you to look for a renovation," I said. "I need you to tell me if you see any construction." And Mike, I need you to wear your body camera. I want to see everything. There was a pause. Reggie, is this about the kid, the son-in-law? Yes, I said. It is about the son-in-law. And Mike, if you find what I think you are going to find, I am going to need you to send me the video immediately. Consider it done, Mike said. I hung up. The trap was set. The audit had begun. And Darian Miller had no idea that his balance sheet was about to go up in flames. The next morning, I sat in my high-rise condo staring at my phone. It was 8:15. The coffee in my mug had gone cold, but I didn't care. I was waiting for the signal. I had dispatched Mike exactly as planned. Mike is a good man. He is a master plumber who has seen the inside of more basements than any man in the city. He is also a man who understands loyalty. 5 years ago, the IRS came after him for payroll discrepancies that his former partner had hidden. I spent 3 weeks digging through his books, finding the paper trail that cleared his name and put his partner in handcuffs. Mike told me then that if I ever needed a body buried, I should call him. I told him I just needed him to look at some pipes. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mike. I am in. The target bought the leak story, accessing the basement now. I felt a grim satisfaction. Darian Miller was a man who thought he knew everything, but he couldn't change a tire if his life depended on it. Telling him there was a pressure drop in the neighborhood main line that required a localized inspection was like taking candy from a baby. He would panic about his property value and open the door wide. I opened the secure app on my laptop that linked to the body camera Mike was wearing. The feed flickered to life. The image was grainy at first, adjusting to the low light of the hallway, but then it sharpened. I saw the familiar beige carpet of the house I had paid for. I saw Darian walking ahead of Mike. He was wearing a silk robe and holding a protein shake, looking annoyed to be awake before noon. "This way," Darian muttered over his shoulder. "Just make it quick. I have a very important Zoom call at 10 with my investors." Investors. I almost laughed. Darian had been unemployed for 3 years. His only investor was me, and he had just fired me from the board of directors. I watched on the screen as they reached the door to the basement. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. This was the moment of truth. This was the moment I would see the framing, the drywall, the plumbing rough-ins for the bathroom I needed. I had wired $100,000 specifically for this project. I expected to see a construction zone. Darian opened the door and flipped a switch. Floodlights illuminated the space below. Mike descended the stairs, the camera bobbing with his steps. I leaned forward toward the screen, my eyes scanning every pixel. I was looking for studs. I was looking for concrete dust. I was looking for the future home of an aging father who just wanted to be close to his daughter. The camera panned the room. There was no construction. There were no studs. There was no dust. The basement had been finished, but not for me. The floor was covered in expensive interlocking rubber mats. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling mirrors. In the center of the room sat a massive multi-station weight machine, a Peloton bike, and a rack of dumbbells that looked like they had never been touched. It was a gym, a high-end commercial-grade gym. But that wasn't all. Mike turned to the left. In the corner where my bedroom was supposed to be, there was a glass-walled enclosure. Inside, there was a large mahogany desk, a professional microphone set up on a boom arm, and soundproofing foam on the walls. Behind the desk, a custom neon sign glowed in electric blue. It read, "The Darian Miller Experience." I stared at the neon sign. The light reflected in my eyes, stinging them. He had built a podcast studio. He had used my retirement money, my safety net, to build a shrine to his own vanity. He was going to sit in that glass box and talk to nobody about how to be a success while spending his father-in-law's money. I felt a physical blow to my gut. It wasn't just theft. It was erasure. They hadn't just stolen the money, they had erased my existence from their future plans. There was no space for me here. There never had been. Mike pretended to inspect a pipe near the ceiling. "Nice setup," Mike said, his voice rough and neutral. "Must have cost a fortune." Darian chuckled. He walked into the frame, sipping his shake. "Yeah, well, you have to spend money to make money, right? It is an investment in my brand." The in-laws chipped in. You know how it is. Chipped in. I gave him everything. Mike moved the camera again, pretending to check the water heater in the corner. Darian turned his back to Mike, assuming the plumber was just a piece of furniture, a worker ant of no consequence. Darian pulled his phone out of his robe pocket. He dialed a number. I turned up the volume on my laptop. The audio feed was crisp. I needed to hear this. "Hey, babe," Darian said into the phone. Yeah, the plumber is here now. Some issue with the city line. No big deal. He paused, listening. I assumed he was talking to Nia. No, he is not looking at the studio. He is just checking the heater. Relax. Another pause. Then Darian laughed. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. Don't worry about your dad, Nia. He thinks he is moving in here, but that is never happening. You really think I am going to let him live in my man cave? No way. My hands clenched into fists on the desk. My fingernails dug into the leather pad. Listen. Darian continued, his voice dropping lower, but the high-fidelity microphone on Mike's vest picked up every syllable. I talked to the lawyer yesterday. We just need to get him to sign that durable power of attorney next week. I will tell him it is for insurance purposes or something. He is getting old, Nia. He is slipping. I wasn't slipping. I was sharpening. Once he signs that, Darian said, walking toward the neon sign, admiring his own reflection in the glass, we can control the assets. I found a place for him. Shady Pines, or whatever it is called. It is cheap, it is state-run, and it is 40 minutes away. We drop him off, we sell his truck, and we use his pension to pay off the Benz. He won't know the difference. He is happy as long as he has a TV and some pudding. The line went dead in my head. The world went silent. Shady Pines. A state-run facility. They weren't just going to ban me from a vacation. They weren't just going to steal my money. They were planning to incarcerate me. They were planning to strip me of my autonomy, my dignity, and my freedom. They saw me as a resource to be drained and then discarded in a warehouse for the dying. And Naya, my daughter, she was on the other end of that line. She was listening to him. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't defending me. She was conspiring. I watched Darian hang up the phone. He flexed his bicep in the mirror of the gym he bought with my money. He looked proud. He looked like a man who had won the lottery. Mike finished his inspection. Looks dry here, boss, Mike said. I will check the meter outside. Good, Darian said, dismissing him with a wave of his hand. Lock the door on your way out. The feed cut to black as Mike walked out to his van. I sat in the silence of my condo. The sun was streaming in through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I felt cold. Freezing cold. It was the chill of a morgue. The father who wanted to be close to his family died in that chair. The man who stood up was someone else entirely. I was the auditor. I was the enforcer. They wanted a power of attorney. They wanted control. They wanted to put me in a home. I reached for my phone and dialed Mike. Did you get it? I asked. I got it all, Reggie Mike said. Sending the file to the cloud now. I am sorry, man. That kid is a monster. He is not a monster, Mike, I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. He is a liability. And I am about to liquidate him. I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened a new file on my computer and named it Operation Eviction. I dragged the video file into the folder. Then I picked up my phone and called Nia. I needed to play my part. I needed to be the confused, loving old man one last time. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to get on that plane to Italy. Because when they landed, I wanted them to have nothing to come back to. The game had changed, and I was holding all the cards. My phone buzzed against the mahogany surface of my desk, pulling me out of the cold reverie of the video file. The screen lit up with a photo of Nia from her college graduation. She looked so innocent, then smiling in her cap and gown, her arm draped around my neck. It was a photo from a different lifetime. I took a deep breath, consciously relaxing the muscles in my jaw and softening the hard lines around my eyes. I pressed the answer button and raised the phone to my ear. Dad Nia's voice was soft, trembling slightly. It was a tone I knew well. It was the voice she used when she crashed her first car. It was the voice she used when she needed tuition for a summer course she had forgotten to register for. It was the voice of a predator camouflaged as a victim. I am here, Nia, I said. My voice was raspy, tired. I played the part of the wounded old man perfectly. Dad. I am so sorry, she gushed. I really am. Darian is just so stressed right now. His investors are breathing down his neck, and he really feels like we need this time alone to reconnect as a couple. It isn't personal. You know we love you, right? I stared at the computer screen where the paused video showed Darian laughing about putting me in a state-run nursing home. I love you too, sweetheart, I lied. It didn't taste bitter anymore. It tasted like necessary medicine. I understand. Marriage is hard work. You two go and have a good time. There was a pause on the other end, a hesitation. I waited. I knew the pivot was coming. The apology was just the appetizer. The main course was always money. "Thanks for understanding, Dad," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But listen, we have a tiny situation. A huge crisis, actually. We just got a letter from the county tax assessor. Apparently the property taxes on the new house were reassessed because of the purchase price. We owe $5,000 immediately or they are going to put a lien on the house." I almost smiled. It was a lazy lie. Property tax assessments take months to process after a sale, and they send multiple warnings before threatening liens. They didn't need tax money. They had blown through the $100,000 I gave them on cars and podcast equipment, and now they were cash poor right before their luxury vacation. They needed walking around money for Italy. They needed cash for dinners and shopping. $5,000, I asked, letting a note of worry creep into my voice. "That is a lot of money, Nia. I just sent you the renovation funds. Is there nothing left?" "Oh, the renovation money is totally tied up in materials," Nia said quickly. "Too quickly. We already paid the contractors for the lumber and the plumbing. That account is basically empty until the work starts. We are totally liquid poor right now, Dad. Please. If we don't pay this tax bill before we leave tomorrow, we could lose the house." Lose the house. The house I bought. The house I held the note on. The audacity was breathtaking. I leaned back in my chair. I could say no. I could tell her to figure it out. But if I said no, they might cancel the trip. They might stay here. And I needed them gone. I needed them out of the country so I could execute the next phase of my plan. I needed them to feel secure, flush with cash, and arrogant. "I can help," I said slowly. "I can transfer the $5,000. "Oh, thank God," Nia exhaled. "You are a lifesaver, Dad. Seriously." But I interrupted, cutting through her gratitude. "I need a favor in return. Anything, Dad. Name it. Since I'm going to be watching the house while you are gone, and since I put so much capital into the property already, I need to make sure everything is insured properly. My insurance agent says that because I am not on the title, I need Darian to sign a liability waiver and an acknowledgement of funds. It is just a formality to make sure that if the house burns down while you are in Italy, my investment is covered." Silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. She was relaying this to Darian. "Insurance paperwork. Boring, harmless. I just need him to sign it before you leave," I added. "I can bring the check for the $5,000 over tonight. We can have a quick dinner. I will give you the check, Darian signs the paper, and you guys go to Italy worry-free." "Hold on a sec, Dad." She covered the phone. I heard muffled voices. Darian's voice was sharp, annoyed. Then Nia came back on the line. "Okay, Dad, that works, but make it quick." "Okay. We have a lot of packing to do. Come over at 7. "I will see you then," I said. I hung up the phone. The screen went dark. $5,000 was a small price to pay for what I was about to get. I turned back to my laptop. I didn't open a generic insurance form. I opened a legal document drafting software that I hadn't used since my days investigating corporate fraud. I selected a template for a promissory note, but I heavily modified it. At the top, in bold, boring font, I typed, "Property liability and capital contribution acknowledgement." It sounded dull. It sounded like bureaucratic nonsense. It looked exactly like the kind of document a man like Darian, who thought he was a genius but was actually functionally illiterate when it came to finance, would skim and sign. I began to draft the clauses. They were artfully disguised. Clause 1 appeared to be about insurance liability, stating that the undersigned acknowledged receipt of funds for property improvement. But hidden in the legalese was a specific confirmation. The borrower acknowledges receipt of $100,000 on June 1st and an additional $5,000 on June 8th for the explicit purpose of property renovation and tax payments. This was crucial. This legally locked them into a specific use for the money. By signing this, Darian was admitting that if he used the money for anything else, say a Maserati or a vacation, he was committing fraud. Clause 2 looked like a standard indemnity waiver, but inserted into the middle of the paragraph was a call provision. It stated that the lender, meaning me, reserved the right to demand immediate repayment of the full principal amount if any funds were found to be misappropriated, or if the borrower engaged in conduct detrimental to the security of the asset. Misappropriated funds, like building a gym instead of an in-law suite. Detrimental conduct, like planning to defraud the lender. Clause 3 was the kill shot. It was a confession of judgment. It waived the borrower's right to a trial or a defense if they defaulted on the repayment demand. It essentially said that if I asked for the money back and they didn't have it, I could seize their assets immediately without a lengthy court battle. I typed furiously, the mechanical click of the keys filling the silent apartment. I was weaving a net made of words. I was building a cage out of paragraphs. I added a final section at the bottom. It required a wet signature, not an electronic one. I wanted the ink on the page. I wanted his DNA on the document. I printed it out on thick, official-looking bond paper. I read it over. It was perfect. To the untrained eye, it looked like a boring agreement about fire insurance and flood damage. To a lawyer, it was a signed confession of theft and a surrender of rights. I took a checkbook out of my desk drawer. I wrote a check for $5,000. I looked at the number. It was the cost of the bait for the trap. I placed the document and the check in a crisp manila envelope. I stood up and walked to the mirror in the hallway. I adjusted my flannel shirt. I messed up my hair slightly to look a bit disheveled, a bit older. I practiced my smile. It was a sad, eager-to-please smile. The smile of a man who just wanted to be loved. I was ready. Darian wanted money. I was going to give it to him, and in exchange he was going to give me everything he had. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. The audit was over. The execution phase was about to begin. I parked my truck on the street this time, making sure the rusted bumper wasn't visible from the bay window. I walked up the driveway with the manila envelope tucked under my arm and the check for $5,000 burning a hole in my pocket. The house was in chaos. Suitcases were exploded all over the living room floor like the aftermath of a designer bomb. Nia was running around throwing bikinis and silk scarves into a pile. Darian was sitting at the head of the dining table amidst the wreckage, eating high-end sushi from a plastic tray. He didn't stand up when I walked in. He didn't offer me a seat. He just pointed a chopstick at me. "Reggie, come on in," he said, his mouth full of tuna. "Grab a chair. We are just refueling. You know how it is. The hustle never sleeps." I sat down. I looked at the spread. Sashimi, nigiri, expensive rolls topped with gold leaf. This dinner easily cost $200. They were pleading poverty an hour ago, begging for tax money, and now they were eating a week worth of groceries in one sitting. Darian swallowed and took a swig of beer. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "So, Reggie, I was telling Nia earlier, you really need to upgrade your ride, man. That truck is a dinosaur. It is bad for your personal brand." "My personal brand," I repeated softly, keeping my eyes lowered. "Exactly," Darian said, leaning back. "In the new economy, perception is reality. You have to look like money to attract money. That is why I invest in quality. That is why I lease the Beamer. That is why we bought this house. It is all about leverage. You old-timers, you believe in saving pennies. That is a scarcity mindset. You have to have an abundance mindset." I listened to him lecture me on economics. A man with zero income. A man with a negative net worth. A man who was eating my money and lecturing me on how to spend it. I nodded slowly, playing the part of the slow-witted student. "You are probably right, Darian," I said. "I am just old-fashioned. I like to pay for things in cash." Darian laughed, a short barking sound. "Cash is trash, Reggie. That is rule number 1. Use other people's money. OPM, that is the secret." He reached for a piece of yellowtail, and as his sleeve rode up, I saw it. The glint of steel and ceramic. The heavy, undeniable presence of a Rolex Submariner on his left wrist. I froze. My eyes locked onto the watch. I knew watches. I had audited jewelry stores. I had seized assets from drug dealers who converted cash into timepieces. I knew the weight. I knew the bezel. I knew the way the light hit the sapphire crystal. That wasn't a fake. That was a brand new Rolex Submariner date. Retail price roughly $10,000, but on the gray market where you can get it without a wait list, it goes for $15,000. $15,000. The number clicked into place in my mental ledger. Last month I had sent them $15,000 for a new HVAC system they claimed had failed. They told me the compressor blew out and they needed an emergency replacement because the house was sweltering. I sent the check the same day. I looked at the thermostat on the wall. It was set to 70 degrees. The air coming from the vent was cool, but the unit outside sounded old and rattly when I walked by. They hadn't replaced the HVAC. Darian had replaced his watch. He was wearing my money on his wrist. He was wearing the sweat off my brow. He was wearing the hours I spent in windowless rooms, staring at spreadsheets. The rage rose up in my throat like bile. It was hot and suffocating. I wanted to reach across the table and rip the watch off his arm. I wanted to flip the table and scream that he was a thief and a liar. I wanted to tell Nia that her husband was a parasite who was bleeding us both dry. I clenched my hands under the table, digging my nails into my palms until the pain grounded me. I took a breath. I thought of Beatrice, my late wife, my moral compass. Before she died, she made me promise. "Watch out for Nia," she had whispered. "She has a blind spot for broken things. Do not let her struggle, Reggie." I was trying Beatrice. I was trying. But saving her meant destroying him. I forced the muscles in my face to relax. I forced my lips into a smile that felt like cracking plaster. "Nice watch," I said, pointing a trembling finger at his wrist. "Is that new?" Darian froze for a microsecond. His eyes darted to the watch, then to me, then to Naya, who was in the other room. He pulled his sleeve down quickly. "Oh, this," he said with a nervous chuckle. "No. No way. It is a replica. A knockoff. I got it on Canal Street years ago. Looks real though, right? That is the abundance mindset. Fake it until you make it." Liar. A fake Rolex ticks. A real Rolex sweeps. I had seen the second-hand sweep. Smooth, silent, perfect. "It looks very real," I said, my voice raspy. "You had me fooled." Darian relaxed. He bought the act. He thought I was too stupid to know the difference. He thought he had outsmarted the old man again. "Anyway," Darian said, waving his hand dismissively, "did you bring the check? We really need to get this tax thing sorted before we fly out. The stress is killing me." I reached for the envelope. I placed it on the table. The paper made a soft sliding sound against the wood. "It is all here," I said. $5,000, just like you asked." Darian reached for it greedily. I put my hand over the envelope, stopping him. "Just one thing," I said. "The insurance paperwork. Like I told Nia, I just need you to sign it. It confirms that the funds are for the house expenses and that I am covered if anything happens while you are gone. My insurance agent is a real stickler. You know how these corporate types are." Darian rolled his eyes. He let out a loud, dramatic sigh. "Seriously, Reggie," he asked. "We are about to go on a dream vacation and you are hitting me with red tape. You really know how to kill the vibe." "I am sorry," I said, shrinking into my chair. "It is just a formality. It won't take a minute." "Fine," Darian snapped. "Give it here." I slid the envelope toward him. He opened it and pulled out the check first. He looked at the amount. He smiled. It was the smile of an addict getting a fix. He pocketed the check immediately. Then he pulled out the document. The promissory note disguised as a liability waiver. He glanced at it. He didn't read the first paragraph. He didn't read the clauses about misappropriation of funds. He didn't read the confession of judgment. He just saw a wall of text and his eyes glazed over. "Where do I sign?" he asked, clicking a pen he pulled from his pocket. "Right there at the bottom," I said, pointing to the line I had highlighted. "And date it, please." Darian scribbled his signature. It was a messy, arrogant scrawl. He dated it. He pushed the paper back to me without even looking at my face. "There," he said. "Happy. You got your paperwork. We got our tax money. Everyone wins." I picked up the document. I blew on the ink to make sure it was dry. I folded it carefully and placed it in my inside jacket pocket, right next to my heart. "You have no idea," I thought. "You are a lifesaver," Reggie, Darian said, standing up and stretching. His Rolex flashed again in the light. "Seriously. Now, if you will excuse me, I have to go pack my silk suits. Italy awaits." He walked away toward the bedroom, leaving me alone at the table with the remnants of his expensive dinner. "Thanks, Dad," Nia called out from the hallway. "We will send you postcards." I stood up. My knees popped. I felt heavy, but strong. "Have a safe flight," I called back. I walked out of the house. I walked past the biometric lock that didn't know my thumbprint anymore. I walked to my truck. I sat in the driver's seat and pulled the document out of my pocket. I looked at the signature. Darian Miller. He thought he had just signed a receipt for free money. He had actually signed a warrant for his own financial execution. I started the truck. I didn't go home to sleep. I drove straight to the office of Kowalski and Associates. It was 9 o'clock at night, but I knew he would be there. Sharks don't sleep, and neither do forensic accountants when they are on the hunt. I had the evidence of the stolen renovation money. I had the video of the podcast studio. I had the proof of the car purchase. And now I had a signed confession and a legal instrument that allowed me to call the loan due immediately. I touched the paper one last time. Bose voci tinqua. That is what he had muttered under his breath when he signed. Father-in-law is too picky. You are right, Darian, I whispered to the empty cab of my truck. I am very picky, and I just picked you apart. I drove through the city streets, which were slick with a light rain that had begun to fall. The neon lights of the bars and clubs reflected on the wet asphalt, but I had no interest in the nightlife. My destination was a limestone building on the corner of 4th and Main. It looked like a fortress because that is exactly what it was. The brass plaque next to the heavy oak door read Kowalski and Associates. I used my key card to enter the lobby. The security guard, a former Marine named Marcus, looked up from his monitor. He saw my face and straightened up. "Good evening, Mr. Carter," he said. "Mr. Kowalski is expecting you in the war room." I nodded and headed for the elevator. Roman Kowalski wasn't just a lawyer, he was a weapon. We had met 15 years ago during the Enron-era fallout. I was the auditor tracking the hidden accounts of a corrupt CEO who had stolen $40 million from his employees' pension fund. Kowalski was the litigator who stripped that CEO of every asset he owned down to his cufflinks. We bonded over a shared hatred for thieves and liars. He was the only white man I trusted implicitly because I knew his loyalty was bought with competence, not with sentiment. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse office. The air smelled of old books and expensive scotch. Kowalski was standing by the window, looking out at the city he had sued into submission more times than I could count. He turned around as I entered. He was 65 years old, but he moved with the energy of a man half his age. He wore a three-piece suit at 10 o'clock at night because he believed a lawyer should always be ready for court. "Reggie," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You look like hell." "I feel like I just woke up from a coma, Roman," I said. I walked to the massive conference table and threw the manila envelope onto the polished wood. It landed with a heavy slap. "What is this?" Kowalski asked, walking over. "That I said sitting down at the head of the table is a signed confession. It is a promissory note with a confession of judgment and a liability waiver." Kowalski picked up the document. He put on his reading glasses and scanned the text. His eyes moved back and forth rapidly. A slow shark-like grin spread across his face. "This is beautiful, Reggie," he murmured. "You drafted this." "I used the old template from the Henderson case," I said. "Clause 2. Kowalski chuckled. "The acceleration clause. Nasty stuff." He looked up at me. "So let me get this straight. You are the private lender for the property at 404 Oak Creek Drive. The deed is held in an LLC you control." "Correct," I said. "And you loaned the occupants, your daughter and son-in-law, $100,000 for specific renovations." "Correct. And they spent it on luxury cars and podcast equipment." I pulled a flash drive from my pocket and slid it across the table. "Video evidence," I said, courtesy of Mike. "No renovation, just a gym and a vanity project, plus bank records showing wire transfers to a shell company and a car dealership." Kowalski picked up the flash drive and tapped it against his chin. He looked at the document again. "And this signature," he said, pointing to Darian's scrawl at the bottom. "This confirms receipt of funds for specific use." By signing this, he legally acknowledged that using the money for anything else constitutes default and fraud. He sat down opposite me. He folded his hands on the table. "Reggie, do you know what you have here?" he asked. "This isn't just a breach of contract. This is a nuclear launch code. Because of the cross-collateralization language in the original deed of trust, which I remember drafting for you 3 years ago, a default on the renovation loan triggers a default on the primary mortgage." I leaned forward. "Explain it to me like I am the jury, Roman." "It means," Kowalski said, his eyes gleaming, "that because he misappropriated the renovation funds, he has voided the terms of the entire housing agreement. You don't just have the right to ask for the $100,000 back. You have the right to call the entire note due. Immediately." He did the math in his head. $450,000 for the house, plus the $100,000 for the reno, plus interest and penalties. He owes you roughly $600,000. And because of this little piece of paper he signed tonight for $5,000, he waived his right to a notice period. He leaned back in his chair. "You can foreclose on him tonight, Reggie. You can lock him out. You can seize the assets inside the house to recoup losses. You can leave him homeless." I sat there letting the words wash over me. Homeless. Darian Miller, the man who mocked my truck, The man who banned me from a vacation, the man who planned to put me in a nursing home, would be homeless. And Nia? I asked, my voice quiet. Kowalski's face softened slightly, but his eyes remained hard. She signed the original deed of trust, Reggie. She is a party to the fraud if she benefited from the funds. Unless she can prove she had no knowledge, she is liable too. She knew, I said. She was on the phone when he talked about the nursing home. She helped spend the money. Then she goes down with the ship, Kowalski said. He stood up and walked to the sideboard, pouring 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal glass. He didn't offer me one. He knew I was working. So here is the question, Reggie Kowalski said, turning back to me. We have the ammunition. We have the target. How do you want to play this? He took a sip of his drink. Option A, he said. We send a demand letter tomorrow. We give them 30 days to cure the default. We scare them straight. Maybe they sell the car. Maybe they get on a payment plan. It is the gentleman's way. It warns them. It gives them a chance to lawyer up and fight us for a few months. He paused, watching my face. Option B, he continued. We go nuclear. I have a judge on speed dial who owes me a favor. I can get an emergency writ of possession signed tonight based on the evidence of active fraud and asset dissipation. We can have the sheriff there by morning. We change the locks. We post the eviction notice. We seize the property. He swirled the ice in his glass. Option B means they come back from Italy to a house they cannot enter. It means their key codes are wiped. It means their stuff is on the lawn. It is total destruction. I looked at the flash drive on the table. I thought about the conversation I had overheard. I thought about Darian laughing at me with his friends. I thought about Nia choosing her husband over her father. I didn't hesitate. I didn't flinch. The part of me that was a father had been buried under the weight of their betrayal. The man sitting at the table was the auditor, and the audit was finished. I don't want to wait until they get back, I said, my voice cold and hard like the steel of the safe in my apartment. Kowalski raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? They fly out tomorrow at noon, I said. They are going to be at the airport checking in for their business class flight, drinking champagne in the lounge thinking they got away with it. I looked Kowalski in the eye. I want the house seized while they are in the air. No. Better. I want the house seized while they are standing at the check-in counter. I want their credit cards to decline while they are trying to pay for their extra luggage. I want them to be stranded in the terminal with no flight, no money, and no home to go back to. Kowalski smiled. It was a terrifying smile, a smile that had ended careers and dismantled corporations. The airport trap, he said. I like it. It is poetic. Can you do it, I asked. Kowalski put his glass down. He picked up his phone. Reggie, for you, I can do anything. I will get the writ tonight. I will have the constables ready. You cancel the flight. I will handle the house. He paused, his finger hovering over the dial button. One last thing, Reggie. Are you sure? Once I make this call, there is no going back. This is your daughter. I stood up. I buttoned my flannel jacket. I felt the weight of the years lifting off my shoulders. I don't have a daughter anymore, Roman, I said. I have a debtor, and I am collecting. Do it. Kowalski nodded and dialed. Judge, sorry to wake you. We have an emergency. Yes, fraud. Massive dissipation of assets. I need a writ. Tonight. Yes. I am sending the evidence now. I walked out of the office while he was still talking. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet. I got into my truck. I checked the time. It was almost midnight. In 12 hours, they would be at the airport. In 12 hours, their world would end. I drove back to my condo. I had one more thing to do. I had to cancel the cards. Not just the travel agency cards. All of them. I had given Nia a supplementary card on my main account years ago for emergencies. She had been using it for groceries and gas, but lately I suspected she was using it for more. I logged into my Amex portal. I saw the pending charges, the sushi dinner from tonight, the gas for Darian's new car. I clicked the button labeled Suspend Card. Then I clicked Report Lost or Stolen. The screen flashed a confirmation. It was done. The safety net was gone. The ground was gone. They were free-falling and they didn't even know it yet. I went to bed, and for the first time in a week, I slept like a baby. The next day was going to be busy. I had a house to repossess. I sat in my condo with the lights off, watching the sun bleed into the sky over the city skyline. It was 6 in the morning on the day they were supposed to leave for Italy. I hadn't slept, but I didn't feel tired. I felt vibrating with a cold electric energy. My laptop was open in front of me, casting a blue glow on my hands. I was waiting for one final piece of the puzzle. I had the financial fraud. I had the intent to commit elder abuse, but I needed to know where the rest of the money went. The $50,000 transferred to DM Ventures LLC had to go somewhere. Shell companies are just mailboxes. Money always has a final destination. My email pinged. It was a secure message from my private investigator. Subject line: DM Ventures beneficiary analysis. I clicked it open. I expected to see gambling debts. I expected to see maybe a failed crypto investment or payments to a loan shark. Darian struck me as the kind of man who made bad bets. I was wrong. It wasn't a bad bet. It was a second life. The report detailed the outgoing transactions from the DM Ventures account. Rent payments for a townhouse in the affluent Buckhead district. Tuition payments for a private preschool called Little Scholars, utility bills, grocery deliveries. And then there were the photos. The investigator had done his job well. There were high-resolution images taken with a telephoto lens. The first photo showed Darian walking out of the townhouse. He wasn't wearing his usual streetwear. He was wearing a dad vest and holding a lunchbox. Walking next to him was a woman. She was white, tall, and blonde. She looked nothing like Nia. She looked expensive. The second photo hit me like a physical blow. Darian was lifting a child into the back seat of an SUV, a little boy, maybe 4 years old. The boy had Darian's nose, Darian's smile. The way Darian looked at that boy was the way a father looks at his son. It was a look he had never given Nia, even when they talked about having children. I scrolled down to the summary. The woman's name was Sarah Jenkins. She was listed as an employee of DM Ventures, receiving a monthly salary of $4,000. My money, my renovation fund. It wasn't just buying a car. It was paying the salary of Darian's mistress. It was paying the rent for his secret family. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. This went beyond greed. This was a level of deception that was sociopathic. He was living 2 lives. He was playing the devoted husband to my daughter living in the house I paid for, driving the car I bought, while simultaneously maintaining a separate household with another woman and a secret child using funds I provided. Nia was completely blind. She thought they were a power couple. She thought they were building an empire together. In reality, she was just the financier. She was the unwitting sugar mama funding her husband's real life. Darian didn't love her. He loved the access she provided to my wallet. I stared at the photo of Darian kissing the blonde woman on the cheek. He looked happy, relaxed, not the stressed entrepreneur he pretended to be with Nia. He was laughing. My daughter was sleeping next to a stranger. She was waking up every morning next to a man who was actively erasing her from his future while spending her father's past. The father in me wanted to scream. I wanted to print these photos, drive to the house, kick down the door, and shove them in Nia's face. I wanted to save her from the humiliation of finding out later. I wanted to protect her heart. I reached for my phone, my thumb hovering over her contact. I could call her right now. I could tell her to look at her email. I could stop them from going to the airport. I could end the charade before they even left the driveway. I started to type a text. Nia, do not get on that plane. I have evidence that Darian is cheating. My phone buzzed in my hand before I could hit send. A text message appeared on the screen. It was from Nia. Dad, did you send the rest of the tax money yet? Darian is checking the account and he is getting super annoyed. Please hurry up. We have to leave for the airport in 2 hours and he does not want to be stressed. Don't make him mad. Okay, I stared at the words. Don't make him mad. She wasn't asking how I was. She wasn't thanking me for the $5,000 I had already physically handed to them last night. She was demanding more. She was managing his emotions at my expense. She was worried about upsetting the man who was using her inheritance to pay for another woman's rent. She was defending the predator. She was prioritizing his comfort over my dignity. I looked at the message again. It was demanding. It was entitled. It was the voice of someone who had never heard the word no. If I told her now, she wouldn't believe me. She would think I was making it up to ruin their trip. She would think I was a jealous old man trying to sabotage her happiness. She would defend him. She would say the photos were fake or out of context. She was too deep in the lie. She needed a shock to the system. She needed to hit the ground hard enough to shatter the illusions she had built around this man. I deleted the text I had started to type. I deleted the warning. I looked at the photo of Darian and his secret son one last time. "You want the money, Nia," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to keep Darian happy." Fine. I wasn't going to tell her. I wasn't going to be the messenger who gets shot. I was going to let reality do the talking. I was going to let her stand in the wreckage of her life and see exactly what she had bought with her loyalty to a liar. She needed to learn. And the tuition for this lesson was going to be expensive. I put the phone down on the desk face down. I didn't reply to her text. Let them sweat. Let them wonder. Let them get in that Uber and ride to the airport thinking they were still in control. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was fully up now. The city was waking up. Somewhere in the suburbs, Darian was probably kissing his secret son goodbye before heading to pick up my daughter for their fake romantic getaway. I turned back to my computer. I forwarded the investigator's report to Kowalski. I added a note. "Keep this in the chamber. We use it when she tries to defend him." Then I closed the laptop. The dirty laundry was aired. The secrets were out. Now it was time to close the lid on the washing machine and start the spin cycle. The airport trap was set, and Darian Miller was walking right into it, holding hands with the wife he was robbing blind. I sat in my office chair with a cup of black coffee in my hand and opened the Instagram app on my phone. It was 11 in the morning. I knew exactly where they were. I knew exactly what they were doing. Darian Miller lived his life for the audience in his phone, not for the people in his real life. I navigated to his profile. The red ring around his profile picture pulsed. He was live. I tapped the screen. The video loaded instantly. The audio was loud and distorted by the ambient noise of a busy terminal. Darian's face filled the screen. He was wearing oversized sunglasses indoors and a designer tracksuit that probably cost $2,000. He was grinning, showing off his veneered teeth. "What is up, everyone? It is your boy Darian Miller coming to you live from the international terminal," he shouted into the phone, holding it high on a selfie stick. "We are about to jet set to Italy for a little business and pleasure. You know how we do it. First class moves only." He panned the camera to the left. Nia was standing there posing next to a stack of luggage. It was a matched set of Louis Vuitton trunks, the hard-sided kind. I did the mental math instantly. That was at least $12,000 worth of luggage. Luggage bought with the money I sent for lumber. Luggage bought with the money I sent for plumbing. Nia blew a kiss to the camera. She looked radiant. She looked rich. She looked like a woman who didn't have a care in the world because her daddy always paid the bills. Darian pulled the camera back to himself. "We are hitting Tuscany. We are hitting the vineyards. Big things coming for DM Ventures this quarter. Stay tuned because we are going to be dropping some serious content." This is what financial freedom looks like, people. If you are still grinding at a 9 to 5, you need to buy my course. Link in bio. I watched the view count tick up. 300 people were watching. 300 people believing the lie. I took a sip of coffee. "Enjoy it, Darian," I whispered to the screen. "Enjoy the freedom. Because in about 5 minutes, you are going to be in chains." They began walking toward the check-in counter. Darian kept the stream running. He wanted everyone to see them walking the red carpet of the priority lane. He wanted everyone to see the agent take their bags. He was addicted to the validation. I watched as they approached the counter for the airline. There was no line for business class. They walked right up. The agent, a woman with a tight bun and a tired expression, smiled professionally. "Passports, please," she said. Her voice was faint on the live stream, but audible. Darian handed them over with a flourish. He didn't put the phone down. He propped it up against his carry-on bag so it was filming him from a low angle. He wanted the audience to see him being served. Checking in for Miller and Carter, Darian announced loudly, "2 for Rome. Business class. Window seats if you got them." The agent typed on her keyboard. I leaned closer to my phone. This was it. The first domino. She typed. She frowned. She typed again. "I am sorry, sir," she said, her voice losing some of its warmth. "I am not seeing a reservation for you." Darian laughed. It was a nervous, arrogant laugh. "Check again, sweetheart. It was booked through Luxury Escapes. Top-tier package." The agent shook her head. "I see the record of the reservation, sir, but it was canceled yesterday." "Canceled." Darian's voice cracked. The cool guy facade slipped for a second. "What do you mean, canceled?" Who canceled it? The purchaser, the agent replied, looking at her screen. Mr. Reginald Carter. The funds were refunded to the original form of payment and the seats were released. Nia stepped into the frame. Her face was pale. Dad, she whispered. Why would Dad cancel the trip? Darian snatched the passports back. He looked at the phone, realizing he was still live, but he was too angry to care. He grabbed the phone and glared at the agent. That old man is senile. He made a mistake. Look, we are here. We have to get on that plane. Just rebook us. I can do that, sir, the agent said patiently. But the flight is nearly full. The only seats left in business class are full fare. Fine, whatever, Darian snapped. Just do it. We are not flying coach. That will be $14,200, the agent said. Total, Nia gasped. 14,000, Darian, we don't have that. Darian waved her off. He was in full damage control mode. He had to save face. He had 300 people watching him. He couldn't look broke. He had to look like a boss. Relax, babe, he said. I got this. It is just money. We will sort it out with the old man later. He reached into his wallet. He didn't pull out his own card. He pulled out the Platinum American Express card with Nia's name on it. The supplementary card attached to my account. The card I had reported stolen 12 hours ago. Put it on this, Darian said, slapping the card on the counter. I watched the screen. My heart rate didn't even jump. I knew the outcome. Physics is physics. If you cut the power, the lights go out. The agent took the card. She swiped it. She waited. Darian drummed his fingers on the counter. He looked at the camera and winked. Minor hiccups, guys. That is business. You have to pivot. The agent looked up. I am sorry, sir. This card has been declined. Declined, Darian shouted. That is impossible. That is a platinum card. It has no limit. It is reporting as lost or stolen, sir, the agent said, handing it back. I cannot accept it. Darian's face turned a blotchy red. He looked at Nia. Call your dad. Call him right now. He is not answering, Nia said, her voice trembling. I tried him in the car. Fine, Darian growled. He dug into his wallet again. He pulled out a Visa, his personal card, the one linked to the account where I sent the renovation money. The account that was now empty because he spent it all on a car and a mistress. Try this one, he said. DM Ventures, corporate account. The agent swiped it. Declined. Try it again, Darian barked. Sir, it is declined for insufficient funds. The chat on the live stream was going wild. I could see the comments popping up on the screen. Broke. Fake. Card declined, LOL. Is this a prank? This guy is a clown. Darian saw the comments. He started sweating. Sweat beaded on his forehead and ran down into his expensive sunglasses. Here, he said, pulling out a third card. A MasterCard. Probably maxed out from the engagement ring he still owed payments on. Declined. And a fourth. A Discover card. Declined. The line behind them was starting to grow. People in business suits were checking their watches and glaring. The agent had lost her patience. Sir, if you cannot provide a valid form of payment, I am going to have to ask you to step aside. I have other passengers to assist. Darian looked at Nia. Do you have anything? I only have the debit card for the joint account, Nia whispered. The one with $12 in it. Darian stood there. The king of the airport. The CEO of nothing. He was surrounded by $12,000 worth of luggage and he couldn't buy a bottle of water. He looked at the camera. He realized the stream was still running. He realized he had just broadcast his financial ruin to the world. He didn't say goodbye to his fans. He didn't sign off with his catchphrase. He just fumbled with the phone and the screen went black. But the image was burned into my mind. The look of absolute panic. The realization that the well had run dry. I sat back in my chair. I took another sip of coffee. It was the best cup of coffee I had ever tasted. They were stranded. They were at the airport with mountains of luggage and no ticket. They had no way forward, and now they had to go back. They had to go back to the house. I checked the time. It was 11:20. Kowalski had sent the constables at 10. By the time they dragged those Louis Vuitton trunks back to Oak Creek Drive, they wouldn't just be locked out. They would be evicted. I closed the Instagram app. The show was over for now. But the reality show of their life was just getting started. I picked up my phone and dialed Kowalski. They are grounded, I said. Good, Kowalski replied. The writ is served. The locks are changed. The sign is up. Perfect, I said. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked toward the airport in the distance. I could almost feel their rage radiating across the city. "Come on home, kids," I whispered. "Come see what I did with the place." I sat in my condo watching the security feed from the front porch of the house on Oak Creek Drive. I had remote access. I had paid for the system. I was the administrator. Darian thought he had locked me out, but he never changed the master code because he didn't know how. I watched the yellow taxi pull into the driveway. It looked out of place against the manicured lawn and the white pillars. It looked like a warning. The taxi driver didn't get out to open the door. Darian shoved the door open himself, kicking it with his expensive sneaker. He dragged himself out into the humid afternoon air. He looked furious. He looked like a man ready to kill. He didn't help Nia with the bags. He marched straight up the walkway, leaving her to struggle with the heavy trunks on the asphalt. I zoomed in on the camera feed. I wanted to see his face when reality hit him. Darian stomped up the steps to the front door. He reached out with his thumb to the biometric scanner. He stabbed his finger against the glass aggressively, expecting the lock to yield to his will. Nothing happened. The ring of light that usually glowed blue remained dark. Dead. He pressed it again, harder. He rubbed his thumb on his pants and tried a third time. "Open, you piece of junk," he shouted. The microphone on the doorbell picked it up clearly. He punched in the keypad code, 1234, the code of a lazy man. The lock chirped. It wasn't the happy chime of entry. It was a harsh, low buzzer. Access denied. Code invalid. Darian kicked the bottom of the door. "Open up," he screamed. Nia was standing behind him now, looking scared. "Darian, what is wrong?" she asked. "Your dad changed the codes," Darian spat. "He locked us out. I am going to break this door down." He stepped back, preparing to throw his shoulder against the solid oak. That is when he saw it. It was taped to the center of the door, right at eye level. A bright orange piece of paper. It was impossible to miss, but in his rage he had looked right past it. I watched him freeze. He leaned in. He read the bold black letters printed on the orange background. Notice of possession. He ripped the paper off the door. He held it in shaking hands. "This property has been seized by the lender pursuant to the terms of the promissory note and deed of trust, dated June 1st. All occupancy rights are hereby revoked. Entry onto this premises constitutes criminal trespass. Violators will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law." Darian read it out loud. His voice wavered on the legal terms. He didn't understand the law, but he understood the threat. "Seized," Nia whispered. "What does seized mean?" "It means he took it," Darian shouted, throwing the paper on the ground. "He stole our house. He can't do this. We have tenant rights. We have squatters' rights." He didn't. The document he signed last night for $5,000 waived those rights. It was a commercial loan agreement, not a residential lease. He was a business partner who had defaulted, not a tenant who missed rent. Darian grabbed the door handle and rattled it violently. He pounded on the wood with both fists. "Open this door, Reggie," he screamed. "I know you are in there." "Open it or I will call the cops. I wasn't there." But the constables had been. Kowalski moved fast. They had come an hour ago, changing the tumblers and securing the perimeter. They had done something else too, something that Darian was about to discover. He turned around, pacing on the porch like a caged animal. He looked out over the front lawn. He stopped. I switched camera views to the wide-angle lens covering the driveway and the yard. Scattered across the green grass like garbage were dozens of heavy-duty black plastic trash bags. They weren't neatly stacked. They were thrown. They were piled in heaps near the curb. Darian walked slowly down the steps. He approached the nearest bag. It was split open slightly. A sleeve of a silk shirt was poking out. His silk shirt. He ripped the bag open. Clothes spilled out onto the grass. His designer jeans, his limited edition sneakers, his collection of baseball caps. He ran to the next bag. He tore it open. It was full of cables and microphones, his podcast equipment. The mixer board was cracked. The boom arm was bent. It wasn't packed. It was evicted. Nia ran to a pile of bags near the mailbox. She opened one and pulled out her dresses, her shoes, her jewelry box. It was all there, dumped like refuse. "They threw our stuff out," Nia screamed. Her voice was high and thin with panic. "Darian, they threw everything out." Darian stood in the middle of the lawn, surrounded by the debris of his fake life. He looked at the house. He looked at the orange sign on the door. He looked at the bags. And then the sky opened up. It started as a drizzle, a few heavy drops hitting the pavement. But within seconds, it turned into a deluge. A summer storm, fast and violent. The rain soaked into the silk shirts. It pooled in the open suitcases. It drenched the electronics. Darian didn't move. He just stood there, letting the rain plaster his expensive hair to his skull. He was holding a wet sneaker in one hand. "Get the bags," Nia shouted, dragging a trash bag toward the porch, trying to find cover. "Help me!" But there was no cover. The porch was small and the wind was blowing the rain sideways. Darian dropped the sneaker. He looked at the security camera. He knew I was watching. He stared right into the lens, water dripping down his face. "You are dead, old man," he mouthed. "You are dead." I took a sip of my water in the dry, cool air of my condo. I wasn't dead. I was alive. For the first time in years, I was truly alive. I watched as they scrambled, trying to shove wet clothes back into plastic bags, trying to drag their $12,000 trunks under the shelter of the oak tree. They looked pathetic. They looked small. They were homeless. They were broke. And they were wet. The audit was complete. The asset was secured. But I wasn't done. Darian had threatened me. He had looked into the camera and threatened me. I picked up my phone. I dialed the non-emergency line for the local police department. I knew the chief. We played golf. "Hello, this is Reginald Carter," I said. "I am the owner of the property at 404 Oak Creek Drive. I have a live feed of 2 individuals trespassing on my land and damaging my property. Yes, I have a restraining order pending. I would like to request a patrol car." Immediately. I hung up. The rain fell harder. Darian was kicking the bags now, screaming at the sky. Nia was sitting on one of her trunks, crying into her hands. "Welcome home, kids," I whispered. "I hope you like what I did with the landscaping." The police were 5 minutes away. The show was about to get even better. I stood on the other side of the reinforced glass, watching Darian lose his mind. He was hammering his fists against the panes, screaming words that were muffled by the storm and the soundproofing. His expensive haircut was plastered to his skull, and mascara, or maybe hair dye, was running down his face in dark streaks. He looked like a wild animal trying to claw its way into a shelter. He looked pathetic. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. It was a dark roast, piping hot. I could feel the warmth spreading through my chest, contrasting sharply with the cold rain soaking my son-in-law. I checked my watch. The police were still a few minutes out. I had time. I wanted him to hear this. I wanted him to understand exactly why his life was imploding. I reached out and unlocked the deadbolt. The mechanism slid back with a heavy metallic clunk. Darian heard it. He stopped pounding. He stepped back, expecting the door to fly open, expecting a fight. I pushed the handle down and opened the door just wide enough to step onto the porch. I stayed under the overhang, keeping myself dry while the wind whipped rain onto Darian's soaking wet silk shirt. "What the hell are you doing to my house?" Darian screamed. He lunged toward me, his hands curled into claws. He was younger than me and stronger than me, but he was off balance. He was slippery with rain and blinded by rage. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I just looked at him with the cold, dead eyes of a man who has seen balance sheets scarier than him. "Get off my property, Darian," I said, my voice low and steady, cutting through the sound of the rain, "or I will add assault to the list of charges." "Your property," Darian spat, wiping water from his eyes. "This is my house. My name is on the mailbox. I paid the mortgage. You can't just lock me out because you are having a tantrum." I took another sip of coffee. "You never paid a mortgage, Darian," I said calmly. "You paid interest. You paid a monthly fee for the privilege of occupying an asset owned by my LLC. But you never paid a single cent of the principal, not one dime. And as of last night, when you signed that document for $5,000, you admitted to misappropriating funds. That triggered a default clause." Darian froze. His brain was trying to catch up. He remembered the paper. He remembered the quick signature so he could get his sushi money. "That was insurance paperwork," he stammered. "You tricked me. It was a promissory note with a confession of judgment." I corrected him. "You admitted you stole the renovation money. You admitted you bought a car instead of building equity. That document allowed me to call the loan due immediately. All of it. The renovation money, the house money, the interest. It is all due, Darian. Right now, do you have $600,000 in your pocket?" Darian looked at Nia, who was shivering by the pile of wet luggage. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. She knew they didn't have the money. She knew they didn't even have enough for a hotel room. "You can't do this," Darian shouted, his voice cracking. "Squatters' rights. Eviction takes months. I know the law." "You know nothing," I said, stepping forward to the edge of the dry porch. "This isn't a residential lease, Darian. This is a commercial lending agreement. You aren't a tenant, you are a failed business partner. And I just foreclosed on the collateral. This house is mine. The locks are mine. The land you are standing on is mine. You are trespassing. Darian looked at the house, then at me. The arrogance was fading, replaced by a dawning horror. He realized he had been outplayed, but he still had one card to play, or so he thought. Fine, he sneered, stepping back into the rain. Keep the house. It is just a building. I have other assets. I have DM Ventures. I have my car. We will go to a hotel. We will sue you for everything you have. Come on, Nia. He turned to grab a suitcase handle. I wouldn't go to the hotel if I were you, I said. And you definitely shouldn't try to drive that car. Darian stopped. He turned back slowly. Why, he asked. Because I own that too, I said. The rain seemed to get louder. Nia stepped closer, the water ruining her designer shoes. What do you mean, Dad? She whispered. I mean that this morning while you were live streaming from the airport, I made a few phone calls, I said. I called the banks that hold your credit card debt. I called the financing company that holds the note on your BMW. I called the private lenders you borrowed from to start your fake business. I looked Darian dead in the eye. Distressed debt is a commodity, Darian. And when a debtor is high risk, banks are very happy to sell that debt for pennies on the dollar to someone willing to collect. I bought it all. I bought your Visa debt. I bought your MasterCard debt. I bought the note on the Maserati and the BMW. Darian turned pale. He looked like he was going to be sick. You bought my debt, he whispered. I am your creditor now, I said, taking a final sip of coffee. I am the bank, and I am calling in all loans. I already flagged the car as a repossession. The tow truck is probably turning the corner right now, and your business accounts? I froze them an hour ago, pending a fraud investigation. You are broke, Darian. I said, my voice devoid of pity. You are not just at zero, you are in the hole. You owe me close to $1 million, and I am going to garnish every paycheck you ever earn for the rest of your life until I am paid back. You will never own a home again. You will never finance a car again. You are finished. Darian fell to his knees in the wet grass. It wasn't a gesture of prayer. It was his legs giving out. The weight of the world had just crushed him. He looked at his hands. He looked at his Rolex. I own that too, I said, pointing at the watch with my mug. Purchased with stolen funds. Hand it over. He clutched his wrist, protecting the watch like it was his soul. No, he whimpered. No. Nia let out a sob, a loud, guttural sound of pure despair. She looked at her husband, the man who promised her the world, and saw a bankrupt fraud kneeling in the mud. Then she looked at me. Her father, the man she had banned from her vacation. Dad, please, she begged. Stop. This is too much. It is exactly enough, I said. You wanted a life without me, Nia. You wanted to be independent. This is what independence looks like. It is cold, it is wet, and it is expensive. I turned my back on them. I walked back into the house and closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I watched them on the security monitor. Darian was pounding the ground with his fists. Nia was standing over him screaming. The audit was closed. The liquidation was in progress, and in the distance, I heard the siren of a police car getting closer. The final act was about to begin. Darian scrambled to his feet, wiping the mud from his knees. He grabbed Nia by the shoulders, shaking her slightly as if trying to wake her from a trance. Look at him, Nia, Darian shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. He has lost his mind. He is having a psychotic break. This isn't about money. This is about control. He is jealous of us. He is jealous of our success and our love, so he is trying to destroy it. Nia looked at him, her eyes wide and confused. Rainwater dripped from her nose and chin, mixing with her tears. She looked at the orange eviction notice on the door, and then back at her husband. She wanted to believe him. I could see it in her face. She had spent 5 years building her entire identity around this man, around the idea that they were a power couple destined for greatness. To admit he was a fraud was to admit she had thrown her life away. She turned to me, her face twisting into a mask of anguish and accusation. Dad, how could you? She screamed. You are sick. Darian is right. You are a bitter, lonely old man who can't stand to see me happy. You ruined my wedding day, you ruined my vacation, and now you are trying to make us homeless. I stood on the porch, protected from the storm, watching my daughter defend the parasite who was consuming her. She was cold, wet, and humiliated, yet she was still fighting for him. She was still reciting the script he had written for her. It broke the last remaining piece of my heart, but it also hardened my resolve. I couldn't save her with words. I couldn't save her with logic. I had to use the nuclear option. I didn't say a word. I didn't defend myself against her accusations. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a thick plastic Ziploc bag. I had prepared it earlier knowing it might rain, knowing this moment would come. Inside was the stack of high-resolution photographs my investigator had taken. The evidence of Darian's other life. I stepped out from under the overhang into the pouring rain. The water hit me instantly, soaking my flannel shirt, but I didn't feel it. I walked up to them, my boots squelching in the muddy grass. Darian stepped back, seeing the look in my eyes. He thought I was going to hit him. I didn't hit him. I threw the plastic bag at his chest. It hit him with a soft thud and fell to the wet grass between them. "What is this?" Nia sobbed, looking down at the bag. More legal papers. More threats. "No, Nia," I said, my voice cutting through the sound of the wind. "That is the renovation money. That is the HVAC money. That is the reason you can't afford to pay your property taxes." Darian looked down. He saw the top photo through the clear plastic. His face went gray. The arrogance vanished instantly, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. He dove for the bag, trying to snatch it up, trying to hide it. "Don't look at it, Nia," he screamed. "It is a trick. It is Photoshop. He is trying to frame me." But he was too slow. Nia was closer. She grabbed the bag before he could reach it. She ripped it open. She pulled out the stack of glossy 8x10 photographs. The first photo showed Darian walking out of a townhouse in Buckhead. He wasn't wearing his usual flashy clothes. He was wearing a casual sweater, looking relaxed and happy. His arm was around a woman, a tall, blonde woman who looked nothing like Nia. She was laughing and he was kissing her temple. Nia stared at the image. The rain fell on the photo, making the colors glisten. She didn't speak. She just flipped to the next one. The second photo showed Darian at a park. He was pushing a swing. In the swing was a little boy, a boy with curly hair and Darian's nose. Darian was beaming with pride. It was the face of a loving father, a face he had never shown to Nia when she talked about starting a family. The third photo was a copy of a lease agreement for the townhouse listed under DM Ventures LLC. The monthly rent was $4,000. The fourth photo was a bank transfer receipt showing $50,000 moving from our joint renovation account to the personal account of Sarah Jenkins, the blonde woman in the pictures. I watched Nia's hands begin to shake so violently that she almost dropped the stack. She looked at the date on the bank transfer. It was 2 days ago. The money I sent for the lumber. "You told me that money was for materials," Nia whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the rain. "You told me the contractor needed a deposit." Darian stood there, his mouth opening and closing. He looked at the photos, then at me, then at the house he had lost. There was no way to spin this. There was no lie big enough to cover a 4-year-old child and a mistress on the payroll. "That little boy is 4 years old, Nia," I said, pointing at the photo in her hand. "He has a whole other family. He has been supporting them for years. And for the last week he has been supporting them with my money. With the money meant for your house." Nia looked up at Darian. Her eyes were wide, filled with a horror so deep it looked like physical pain. "Is this true?" she asked. "Darian, tell me this is fake. Tell me my dad is lying." Darian looked at her. He saw the end of the road. He saw the eviction notice, the repossessed car, the frozen bank accounts, and now the exposed affair. The facade he had maintained for 5 years shattered completely. He didn't drop to his knees and beg for forgiveness. He didn't cry. He stood up straighter and his face twisted into a sneer of absolute contempt. "Yeah, it is true," he spat. "So what?" Nia recoiled as if he had slapped her. "So what? You have a child. You have a mistress. You stole my dad's money to pay her rent. I had to," Darian shouted, throwing his hands up. "Do you have any idea how expensive it is to live in this city? Do you know the pressure I am under? Sarah listens to me. Sarah doesn't nag me about when my business is going to take off. Sarah appreciates me." He took a step toward Nia, his eyes wild. "And you know why I did it, Nia? You really want to know? Because I was bored. I was bored of you. I was bored of your needy personality. I was bored of your constant talk about your daddy." He pointed a finger at me. "And I was sick to death of him. That controlling, arrogant old man watching every move I made, judging my car, judging my clothes. I needed an escape. I needed a place where I was the man, where I wasn't just Reggie Carter's charity case son-in-law. Sarah treats me like a king. You treat me like a project. Nia stood there, the rain mixing with the mascara running down her cheeks. She looked like a statue of grief. You used us, she whispered. You used me to fund your life with her. It is called leverage. Nia Darian laughed a harsh, cruel sound. That is business. You were the investor. She was the asset. Don't act like a victim. You got to live in a nice house. You got to drive a nice car. You got to pretend you were happy. We both got what we wanted until your psycho father decided to blow it all up. He turned to me, his teeth bared. You think you won, old man? You think you are smart? You are just a sad, lonely guy with a checkbook. You can take the house, take the car. I don't care. I have Sarah. I have a real family waiting for me. I looked at him calmly. Sarah isn't waiting for you, Darian, I said. He froze. What are you talking about? I sent her the eviction notice too, I said. And the bank freeze notification. And a copy of your credit report showing the bankruptcy I just forced you into. I called her 10 minutes ago. She knows you are broke. She knows the money train has derailed. Darian pulled out his phone. He frantically dialed a number. He put it to his ear. He waited. Then he pulled the phone away. He stared at the screen. Blocked. I watched the realization wash over him. He had nothing. No house, no car, no wife, no mistress, no money. Nia dropped the photos into the mud. She looked at the man she had married, the man she had defended against her own father. She saw him clearly for the first time. He wasn't a victim of stress. He wasn't a misunderstood genius. He was a monster. Get away from me, she whispered. Darian looked at her, then at me. His face crumpled. The rage drained out of him, leaving only fear. Nia, wait, he started reaching for her. Don't touch me, she screamed, backing away. Don't you ever touch me again. The sound of sirens cut through the rain. Blue lights flashed against the white columns of the house. The police cruiser turned the corner. I stepped back onto the porch. The show wasn't over yet. The police were here for the trespasser. And Darian Miller was standing on my lawn with nowhere left to run. The sirens were getting louder, cutting through the humid air like a knife, but Darian didn't seem to hear them. He had snapped. The reality of his situation had finally fractured his mind. He looked around the lawn frantically, his eyes darting from the eviction notice to the ruined luggage to me standing dry and calm on the porch. He needed to destroy something. He needed to make someone else feel the pain he was feeling. He ran to one of the open trash bags that had spilled onto the driveway. It contained his sports equipment. He kicked aside a tennis racket and grabbed a heavy aluminum baseball bat. It was a high-end bat, custom, painted just like everything else he owned. He turned toward my truck, the 10-year-old Ford F-150 that he had mocked for years. The truck, he said, lowered the property value. The truck that he forbid me from parking in the driveway. He screamed a sound of pure primal rage and swung the bat. The first blow shattered the driver's side headlight. Plastic and glass exploded outward, raining down on the wet asphalt. Darian swung again. This time he hit the hood. The metal crunched with a sickening sound. He was putting all his weight into it, all his frustration, all his failure. He was beating the truck because he couldn't beat me. Stop it, Darian, Nia screamed. She covered her ears, her face twisted in terror. You are making it worse. But he didn't stop. He moved down the side of the truck, smashing the side mirror, shattering the window, leaving deep dents in the door. I didn't move. I didn't yell. I simply pulled out my phone and held it up, recording every swing. Every impact was another charge. Every dent was another $1,000 he owed me. The commotion had drawn an audience. The neighbors, the people Darian tried so hard to impress, were standing on their porches or peering through their windows. I saw Mr. Henderson from across the street. He was holding his phone up, filming. I saw the woman from next door, the one Darian bragged to about his crypto investments. She was shaking her head, holding her hand over her mouth. Darian saw them too. He stopped mid-swing, breathing heavy, his chest heaving. He looked at his neighbors. He wanted them to see a victim fighting back. But they didn't see a victim. They saw a violent man destroying property in the rain. They saw a criminal. What are you looking at? Darian screamed at them, brandishing the bat. Get back inside. Mind your own business. He turned back to me, his eyes wild. You want to ruin me, old man? You want to take everything? Fine. I will take this truck apart piece by piece. He raised the bat to smash the windshield. Freeze! Drop the weapon! The voice was amplified, booming from a loudspeaker. 3 police cruisers had skidded to a halt at the curb, blocking the driveway. Blue and red lights flashed, strobing against the white siding of the house and the wet grass. 4 officers were already out of the cars, their service weapons drawn and leveled at Darian. Darian froze. The bat hovered in the air. "I said drop it!" the lead officer shouted. "Now!" The bat clattered to the driveway, rolling into a puddle. Darian raised his hands slowly. He looked confused, as if he couldn't understand why the police were pointing guns at him. He was Darian Miller. He was the homeowner. He was the victim. "It is okay, officers," Darian yelled, trying to put on his charming voice but failing. "This is a misunderstanding. This is a domestic dispute. That man is trespassing on my property. Get on the ground," the officer barked, moving forward. "But I live here," Darian pleaded. "Get on the ground now." 2 officers moved in. One kicked Darian's legs apart and forced him face down into the wet, muddy grass. I watched as my son-in-law, the man who thought he was untouchable, was pressed into the dirt. I heard the click of the handcuffs. It was a sharp, final sound. They hauled him to his feet. He was covered in mud. His silk shirt was ruined. His face was streaked with dirt and tears. "You are making a mistake," Darian shouted, struggling against the grip of the officers. "I am the victim. He stole my house. He stole my life." One of the officers walked up to the porch. It was Sergeant Miller, no relation to Darian. I knew him. "Mr. Carter," the sergeant asked. "I am Reginald Carter," I said, stepping forward. "I am the legal owner of this property." The sergeant nodded. "We received the writ of possession and the documentation from your attorney, Mr. Kowalski. We also have a complaint for criminal mischief and assault." I pointed to the truck. "He destroyed my vehicle, Sergeant. And he threatened me. I have it on video." "We saw it, sir," the sergeant said. He turned to the officers holding Darian. "Read him his rights." Darian's eyes bulged. "Rights? For what?" Darian Miller, the officer, recited. "You are under arrest for criminal trespass, criminal mischief in the first degree, and assault. We also have a warrant for your arrest regarding financial fraud and check kiting filed by the district attorney this morning." Check kiting. That was new. Kowalski must have found something else in the audit. Darian had been floating bad checks between accounts to keep his scheme afloat. That was a felony. Nia ran toward the police car. "Please don't take him. He is just stressed. He didn't mean it." The officer stopped her. "Ma'am, step back. Unless you want to join him, I suggest you stay out of this." Nia froze. She looked at Darian being shoved into the back of the cruiser. She looked at me standing on the porch of the house she used to live in. She realized she was alone. Another car pulled up, a black, unmarked sedan. The door opened and Chief of Police Robert Anderson stepped out. He was a tall man with silver hair and a stern face. He didn't look at Darian. He didn't look at the neighbors. He walked straight up the driveway toward me. Darian saw him through the window of the police car. He started banging his head against the glass, screaming, "Tell them who I am. Tell them this is my house." Chief Anderson ignored him. He walked up the steps and extended his hand. Reggie, the chief, said, his voice warm and respectful. "I am sorry it came to this. Kowalski called me. He told me you might need some backup." "Thank you, Bob," I said, shaking his hand. "It is a sad day, but it had to be done. I remember what you did for the department pension fund back in '98, the chief said loud enough for the neighbors to hear. You saved a lot of good cops from losing their retirement. If you say this man is a fraud, then he is a fraud. We will make sure he is processed by the book. No bail until the arraignment." Darian stopped banging on the glass. He was staring at us. He saw the chief of police shaking my hand. He saw the respect. He saw the power dynamic shift in real time. He had spent years telling everyone I was a nobody, a simple old man with a lucky savings account, and now he was watching the highest law enforcement officer in the city treat me like a peer. The realization broke him. I could see it in his face. The delusion shattered. He wasn't the king. He was the peasant who tried to steal the crown. The chief turned to his officers. "Get him out of here. Take him to central booking." The cruiser started to roll. Darian pressed his face against the window. He looked at me one last time. He wasn't angry anymore. He was terrified. He mouthed one word, "Please." I didn't respond. I didn't smile. I just watched as the car turned the corner and disappeared, carrying the man who had tried to erase me. The chief turned back to me. "Do you want us to remove the woman as well?" I looked at Nia. She was standing in the rain next to her ruined Louis Vuitton bags. She was shivering. She looked small and broken. "No," I said. "She isn't arrested." "But she can't stay here." "I understand," the chief said. "We will make sure the property is secured before we leave." "Thank you, Bob." The chief walked back to his car. The sirens faded. The neighbors went back inside their homes, whispering and typing on their neighborhood group chats. It was just me and Naya now. The rain was slowing down, turning into a steady drizzle. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. I looked at my daughter. She looked like a stranger, and I knew that the hardest part of the day was just beginning. The taillights of the police cruiser disappeared around the curve, leaving a red streak in the wet gray afternoon, and silence rushed back into the void where the sirens had been. It was just the sound of the rain hitting the pavement and the sound of my daughter weeping. Nia stood in the middle of the driveway, surrounded by the wreckage of her luggage. Her designer dress was ruined and her hair was plastered to her face. She looked like a child who had lost her balloon. She looked up at me, standing dry and elevated on the porch. She took a step forward, her expensive heels slipping on the wet concrete. "Dad," she choked out. "Dad, please." She didn't walk to me. She collapsed. She fell to her knees right there in the mud and the oil stains left by the tow truck. It was a pose of total surrender. "I made a mistake, Dad," she sobbed. "I didn't know he was criminal. I didn't know about the other woman. You have to believe me. Please let me in. It is cold. I have nowhere to go. Open the door, Dad. Just for tonight. I will divorce him, I swear. I will fix this. Just let me come home." She crawled a few inches forward, reaching her hand out toward the stairs. It was the hand that had typed that text message. It was the hand that had held the champagne glass while they laughed about putting me in a home. I looked down at her, and for a split second the years melted away. I didn't see a 32-year-old woman who had conspired to defraud me. I saw the 6-year-old girl who scraped her knee learning to ride a bike. I saw the teenager crying over a failed math test. My instinct, the biological imperative that is wired into every father, was to rush down those stairs. I wanted to pick her up. I wanted to wrap her in a blanket and make her hot cocoa. I wanted to tell her that Darian was the bad guy and she was just a victim, and everything was going to be okay because Daddy was here to fix it. My hand actually twitched toward the door handle. I almost did it. I almost opened the sanctuary to the enemy. But then 2 words flashed in my mind like a neon sign. Family only. That was the text she sent me. Not Darian. Nia. She had typed it. She had hit send. She had looked at the itinerary for Italy and decided that her father, the man who paid for the ticket, didn't make the cut. I thought about the last 10 years. I thought about the birthdays where I sat alone because they were too busy. I thought about the phone calls that only happened when they needed money. I thought about the way she stood silently while Darian mocked my truck. She hadn't been a victim. She had been an accomplice. She was only sorry because the money was gone. She was only kneeling in the mud because the mansion was locked. If I opened that door now, I wouldn't be saving her. I would be destroying her. I would be teaching her that there are no consequences for betrayal. I would be teaching her that she could stab me in the back and I would still bandage her hand. I couldn't do that to her. I loved her too much to let her stay a child forever. The ice in my chest that had melted for a second froze over again harder than before. I didn't step down the stairs. I stayed behind the threshold. "Nia," I said, my voice flat and final. "You told me 3 days ago that you wanted to be independent. You told me that vacation was for family only." She looked up, hope flickering in her wet eyes. "I didn't mean it, Dad. Darian made me. Darian didn't make you do anything." I corrected her. "You are 32 years old, Nia. You are a grown woman. You chose him. You chose his lifestyle. You chose his lies over my truth. You chose your family, Nia, and now you have to live in it." "But he is gone," she wailed. "He is in jail." "Exactly," I said. "That is the reality you bought. You need to figure out what comes next on your own. I cannot save you from yourself anymore." "Dad, please," she screamed, scrambling to get up. "Don't leave me here. Look at the bright side," I said coldly. "You have $12,000 worth of luggage to sleep on." "Good luck, Nia." I grabbed the heavy oak door. I didn't slam it. I closed it slowly, deliberately. I watched the sliver of her face disappear. I watched her realization that the bank of Dad was permanently closed. The latch clicked shut. It was the loudest sound in the world. I threw the deadbolt. I turned off the porch light, plunging her into the gray, rainy dusk. I walked to the window and watched through the blinds. Nia stood there for 5 minutes staring at the closed door. Then she realized no one was coming. She pulled out her phone. She didn't call a lawyer. She called an Uber. She dragged her wet Louis Vuitton trunk to the curb and sat on it waiting for a ride to a friend's couch. She looked small, she looked broke, but for the first time in her life, she looked like someone who was about to learn how to survive. 3 months later, I sat on the hard mahogany bench of the Superior Court watching the bailiff lead Darian into the room. He wasn't wearing his Italian silk suits anymore. He was wearing a cheap, ill-fitting gray suit that his public defender had probably pulled out of a donation bin. His wrists were free, but his ankles were shackled, a reminder that he was currently a guest of the county jail pending his fraud trial. He looked gaunt. His skin was sallow, and his hair, which used to be perfectly coiffed, was growing out unevenly. He looked like what he was, a desperate criminal who had run out of road. Nia sat at the plaintiff's table, but she sat as far away from Darian's empty chair as possible. She looked tired. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple department store dress. She had dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. She wouldn't look at me. She stared at her hands, twisting a cheap ring on her finger where her diamond wedding band used to be. They were suing me. It was a Hail Mary pass, a final desperate attempt to claw back some dignity and money. Their argument was simple and infuriating. They claimed the house and the renovation money were gifts. They claimed that under the law, a parent providing housing for a child is presumed to be a gift unless stated otherwise. They were arguing that I had no right to evict them or seize the assets because I had given them voluntarily. They wanted the house back. They wanted the car back. They wanted damages for emotional distress. It was the audacity of the entitled. The judge, a stern woman named Justice Halloway with glasses perched on the end of her nose, called the court to order. Darian's lawyer, a court-appointed attorney who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, stood up. "Your Honor," he began, his voice shaky. "We intend to prove that Mr. Carter gave these funds freely as a wedding present and acts of fatherly affection." The sudden reclassification of these gifts as loans was a retaliatory act caused by a family dispute. There was no formal mortgage. There was no intent to repay. Therefore, the foreclosure was illegal. Nia nodded along. She was banking on the emotional angle. She was banking on the idea that a father wouldn't loan money to his daughter, he would give it. She was weaponizing my love against me one last time. I didn't move. I didn't object. I just looked at Kowalski. He was sitting next to me, relaxed, leaning back in his chair like he was watching a boring movie. He checked his watch. He stood up slowly, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor," Kowalski said, his voice filling the room. "The defense disputes the characterization of these funds as gifts. We have evidence that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that Mr. Miller and Mrs. Miller were fully aware that this was a commercial transaction subject to specific performance clauses." Darian sneered. He leaned over and whispered something to his lawyer. He thought he had me. He thought because he never signed a mortgage document at a bank that he was safe. Kowalski walked to the evidence table. He picked up a single piece of paper. It was the document from that night. The document I brought with the $5,000 check. "I present Defense Exhibit A," Kowalski said, handing the paper to the bailiff. "A promissory note and capital contribution acknowledgement signed and dated by Mr. Darian Miller on June 8th. Darian froze. He stared at the paper as it passed him. He remembered the sushi dinner. He remembered signing the insurance paperwork so he could get the check. His face went white. Kowalski continued. "In this document, Mr. Miller acknowledges receipt of $100,000 for the specific purpose of renovation. Clause 2 clearly states that misuse of these funds constitutes a default and converts the arrangement into an immediate demand loan. Clause 3 is a confession of judgment." The judge put on her glasses. She read the document. She looked at Darian. "Mr. Miller, is this your signature?" Darian stammered. "I thought it was insurance. He tricked me. He told me it was just for liability." The judge narrowed her eyes. "You are a businessman, Mr. Miller. You own a company called DM Ventures. Are you telling this court that you signed a legal financial instrument without reading it?" Darian opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was trapped by his own arrogance. He had been so eager for the cash he didn't look at the hook. But that wasn't the end. Kowalski wasn't done. "Your Honor, regarding the plaintiff's claim that Mr. Carter acted out of malice or senility, we would like to play Defense Exhibit B." Kowalski pulled out a laptop. He connected it to the court's audio system. He pressed play. The sound of static filled the room, followed by Darian's voice, crystal clear, recorded by Mike's body camera in the basement. That old man thinks he's moving in here. I'll dump him in the cheapest nursing home the moment he signs the power of attorney." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Nia gasped. She covered her mouth with her hand. She had heard it live on the phone, but hearing it played back in a court of law was different. It sounded monstrous. Then the recording continued. "We drop him off, we sell his truck, and we use his pension to pay off the Benz. He won't know the difference." Darian shrank in his seat. He looked small. The judge looked at him with an expression of pure disgust. "This proves," Kowalski said, turning off the audio, "that the plaintiffs had no intention of honoring a family relationship. They were conspiring to commit elder abuse and fraud. Mr. Carter acted to protect his assets from active theft. This was not a gift, Your Honor. This was a heist that was stopped in progress. The judge didn't need to deliberate. She didn't need a recess. She looked at the papers on her bench. She banged her gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. Judgment for the defendant, she ruled. The court finds that the funds were a loan subject to strict conditions which were violated. The foreclosure is upheld. The seizure of assets is upheld." She turned her gaze to Darian. "Mr. Miller, you admitted to misappropriating funds in a signed document. You are hereby ordered to repay the full amount of $100,000 plus legal fees. Failure to pay will result in a contempt of court charge, adding time to your current sentence for fraud." Darian put his head in his hands. He didn't have $100,000. He didn't have $100. He was going to prison for a long time. The judge looked at Nia. "Mrs. Miller, regarding your claim for equity in the home. Since the funds were obtained through fraudulent means and the mortgage was never paid down, there is no equity to distribute. You are awarded nothing. The case is dismissed with prejudice." Nia sat there stunned. She had lost the house. She had lost the lawsuit. She had walked away with zero. She looked at me across the aisle. Her eyes were pleading. She wanted me to fix it. She wanted me to write a check and make the bad judge go away. I stood up. I didn't look at her. I gathered my papers. I shook Kowalski's hand. "Good work, Roman," I said. "Just doing the job, Reggie," he replied. I walked out of the courtroom. I walked past Darian, who was being handcuffed again by the bailiff. I walked past Nia, who was sobbing quietly at the table. I walked out into the hallway and down the steps of the courthouse. The sun was shining. The air was crisp. It was over. The legal battle was won. The moral victory was secured. But I didn't feel happy. I felt light. The weight of the parasite was gone. I was free. I walked to my truck and got in. I had a flight to catch, not to Italy with them, but to Italy for me. It was time to start living the life they tried to steal. Darian Miller used to wear Italian silk, but now he wore county orange. The man who bragged about his abundance mindset was now begging for extra commissary packets of ramen noodles. He wasn't a king in cell block D, he was a joke. The other inmates knew his story because prisoners have a code. They respect bank robbers, and they respect guys who hustle the system. But they don't respect a man who steals from his own elderly father-in-law. They called him the podcast. It wasn't a compliment. Every time he tried to talk about his business plans or his crypto strategies, they laughed him out of the common room. But the final nail in his coffin didn't come from a guard or an inmate. It came in a letter from Sarah Jenkins, the blonde woman he had built a secret life with, the woman he stole my money for. He opened it during mail call hoping for money or a promise to wait. Instead, he found a restraining order and a notice that she had changed her phone number. She wrote one line at the bottom. "You are broke, Darian, and I don't date broke men." It was the brutal transactionality he had lived by turned against him. He crumbled right there on the concrete floor. The facade was gone. The investor was gone. The mistress was gone. He was just a man alone in a cage with a debt he could never repay. While Darian rotted in a cell, Nia was serving coffee to people who used to be her peers. She got a job at a diner on the outskirts of town. It wasn't a trendy brunch spot where influencers took photos of avocado toast. It was a place where truckers stopped for pie at 2 a.m. She wore a uniform that smelled like grease and stale coffee, and she lived in a studio apartment above a laundromat. Her Louis Vuitton trunks were stacked in the corner serving as a coffee table because she couldn't afford furniture. She had sold most of her jewelry to pay the security deposit. The humiliation was a daily ritual. Every time a customer snapped their fingers at her, she remembered how she used to snap her fingers at me. Every time she counted her tips, she remembered the $100,000 she had watched Darian blow on a fantasy. But the silence was worse than the poverty. Thanksgiving arrived like a ghost haunting her small room. In the past, I would have cooked a turkey. I would have made her favorite mac and cheese. We would have watched football and laughed. This year she sat alone in her cold apartment eating a sandwich from the diner. The loneliness broke her defenses. She picked up her phone. Her hands were rough from washing dishes and her nails were chipped. She dialed my number. The number she had ignored so many times. The number she only called when she needed a transfer. She held the phone to her ear, closing her eyes, praying for my voice. She wanted to say sorry. She wanted to hear me say it was okay. She wanted her dad back. But the phone didn't ring. Instead, a mechanical operator voice answered. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. She pulled the phone away and stared at it. Disconnected. I hadn't just blocked her. I had erased the line. I had changed the number I had owned for 20 years. It was the final severance. The bridge wasn't just burned, it was demolished. She realized then that I wasn't waiting by the phone. I wasn't pining for her return. I had moved on. She curled up on her mattress and wept, not for the money, but for the father she had thrown away. 2 weeks later, a single piece of mail arrived in Nia's mailbox. It wasn't a bill, and it wasn't a court summons. It was a postcard. The stamp was foreign and colorful. The image on the front was breathtaking, showing rolling hills and golden sunlight with vineyards stretching to the horizon. It was Tuscany, the place she was supposed to go, the place she had banned me from. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she flipped it over. She expected a message. She expected a lecture. Maybe a scrawled "I told you so" or "I hope you are learning your lesson." But there were no words. The message section was completely blank. There was only a photo taped to the back. A small printed photo of me. I was sitting at a table on a stone balcony holding a glass of red wine. The sun was setting behind me, casting a warm glow on my face. I wasn't looking at the camera with anger. I wasn't looking with sadness. I was laughing. My head was thrown back in genuine, unburdened joy. I looked 10 years younger. I looked like a man who had shed a heavy load. Nia stared at the photo in the dim light of the laundromat hallway. The message was louder than any words could have been. It said, "I am happy without you." It said, "Your absence is not a punishment, it is a relief." It said, "I am living the life you tried to steal, and I am doing it with a smile." She dropped the postcard. It fluttered to the dirty floor, landing face up. My smiling face looked up at the peeling paint of the ceiling. The regret didn't just bite her, it swallowed her whole. She had traded a father who would have given her the world for a husband who gave her nothing but debt. And now she was watching the sunset from the bottom of a hole she dug herself while I toasted the horizon in Italy. I sat on the terracotta terrace of the Villa San Michele overlooking the rolling hills of Tuscany as the sun began its slow descent into the horizon. The light was that particular shade of gold that you only see in Italy, a rich, warm hue that makes everything look like an oil painting. The air smelled of cypress trees and roasted garlic from the kitchen below, where a private chef was preparing dinner. It was the exact vacation Darian had planned. It was the exact view Nia had bragged about on social media. But they weren't here. The villa was quiet except for the chirping of cicadas and the clink of crystal against stone. I reached for the bottle resting on the table. It was a Chateau Margaux 1996. It was the same vintage Darian had cracked open at his party, the one he had poured for his friends while mocking me through the window. He had drunk it for the price tag. He had drunk it to prove he was a big shot. I poured a glass for myself. The liquid was dark and heavy like ruby velvet. I took a sip. I drank it for the taste. I drank it because I appreciated the history and the craft. That was the difference between us. He consumed value. I understood it. The wine tasted like victory. It tasted like justice. It washed away the lingering bitterness of the last 6 months, leaving only a clean, clear sense of peace. I wasn't lonely. I was solitary. There is a difference. Loneliness is the absence of people. Solitude is the presence of oneself. For the first time in 40 years, I was fully present in my own life. I wasn't worrying about Nia's tuition. I wasn't worrying about Darian's schemes. I was just a man watching the sun set over a world that was vast and beautiful and entirely mine to explore. My phone buzzed on the stone table, disrupting the silence. It wasn't a call. I had changed my number, so the only people who had it were people I actually wanted to talk to. It was a notification from my bank app. I picked it up and unlocked the screen. The notification was simple. Wire transfer received. $850,000. It was the proceeds from the sale of the house at 404 Oak Creek Drive. After legal fees, after paying off the liens I had bought, and after the accelerated foreclosure process, the house had sold for a premium. The market was hot, and the new buyers didn't care about the history of the property. They just saw a beautiful colonial in a gated community. To me, that number represented betrayal. That $850,000 was composed of the lies Darian told, the tears Nia cried, and the disrespect they had both heaped on my name. It was dirty money. It was money stained with the entitlement of my daughter and the greed of my son-in-law. I looked at the balance in my account. It was already substantial. I didn't need this cash. I didn't want it. Keeping it felt like keeping a souvenir from a war I wanted to forget. I thought about Beatrice, my wife, the woman who had made me promise to take care of Nia. I had failed that promise in one way, but I had honored it in another. I had stopped enabling her. I had forced her to grow up. But Beatrice wouldn't want this money to sit in a vault. She was a teacher. She believed in education. She believed in giving chances to people who were willing to work for them. I opened a new tab on my phone. I navigated to the portal for the United Negro College Fund. I had set up a draft transfer weeks ago waiting for this moment. The fund was named the Beatrice Carter Memorial Scholarship. It was designated specifically for students studying forensic accounting and business ethics. Students who came from nothing. Students who knew the value of $1 because they had to earn every single one. I looked at the cursor blinking in the amount field. I typed in 850000, $850,000, every single cent from the house. I didn't keep a finder's fee. I didn't keep the interest. I scrubbed my hands clean of the Oak Creek debacle. I pressed submit. The screen loaded for a second, and then a green check mark appeared. Transaction complete. I felt a physical weight lift off my chest. The money was gone. It was no longer a weapon used by Darian to hurt me. It was a seed planted for the future. Somewhere out there, a kid was going to get a full ride to college because I decided to stop funding a fraud and start funding a future. Nia was scraping by on waitress tips, and Darian was trading ramen noodles, but because of them, a dozen kids would get a chance at a real life. That was the best return on investment I could ever ask for. Footsteps echoed on the stone path behind me. I turned around. It was Desmond, my oldest friend. We had grown up together in the same neighborhood in Chicago. He had retired from the police force 10 years ago and moved to Italy to paint landscapes. He was the one who found me this villa. Behind him were two other men. Alessandro, a local vineyard owner, and Thomas, a retired British diplomat. They were carrying a platter of cheese and another bottle of wine. They were laughing about a joke Thomas had told. They didn't care about my bank account. They didn't care about my past career as an executive. They liked me because I could tell a good story and I played a decent game of chess. They were my peers. They were my chosen family. Reggie put that phone away. Desmond called out, his voice booming and cheerful. The sun is going down and the pasta is coming out. You are missing the best part of the day staring at a screen. I smiled. I placed the phone face down on the table. He was right. I was done with screens. I was done with digital drama. I am coming, I said. I just had to take care of one last piece of business. Desmond walked over and clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. Is it done? He asked quietly. He knew the whole story. He knew about the trial. He knew about the postcard. It is done, I said. The house is sold. The money is donated. I am free. Desmond nodded. Good. Then let us drink to that. We gathered around the stone table. Alessandro poured the wine. The amber light of the setting sun bathed us in a warm glow. I looked at these men. We didn't share blood. We didn't share a last name. But there was respect here. There was loyalty. If I fell right now, they would pick me up. They wouldn't check my pockets for my wallet first. I raised my glass. The crystal caught the last rays of the sun. The men fell silent, waiting for me to speak. I thought about Nia alone in her apartment. I thought about Darian in his cell. I felt a flicker of pity, but it was distant, like a memory of a bad dream. Then I looked at Desmond, Alessandro, and Thomas. I want to propose a toast, I said, my voice steady and strong, to what Reggie Thomas asked. To freedom, to truth, I said, but mostly to family. I paused, letting the word hang in the cool evening air. I spent my whole life thinking family was something you were born into, I said. I thought it was an obligation, a debt you paid with your life. I thought it meant setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. I looked at each of them in turn. But I learned the hard way that I was wrong. Family isn't the DNA you share. Family isn't the people who feel entitled to your seat at the table. Family are the people who respect you enough to pull out a chair for you. I raised the glass higher. Family are the people who cherish you while you are alive, not the ones who cry the loudest at your funeral because they realize the ATM is broken. Hear, hear, Desmond said softly. To the living, Alessandro added, clinking his glass against mine. To the living, I repeated. We drank. The wine was rich and complex. It tasted like the earth. It tasted like Italy. It tasted like the rest of my life. I sat back in my chair and looked out at the horizon. The sun dipped below the hills and the sky turned a deep, bruising purple before fading into night. The stars began to come out one by one. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder if Nia had received the postcard. I didn't care. That story was written. That book was closed. I turned to Desmond. Deal the cards, I said. I feel lucky tonight. Desmond laughed and pulled a deck of cards from his pocket. The sounds of shuffling and friendly banter filled the air. I took a deep breath of the cool Tuscan night. I was Reginald Carter. I was 70 years old. And for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The screen of my mind went dark on the past, and the credits rolled. I was ready for the sequel. I spent 40 years building a fortune thinking it would secure my family's future, but I learned the hard way that money doesn't build families, values do. If you raise your children to value your wallet more than your wisdom, you aren't raising heirs. You are raising parasites. The hardest truth I had to accept was that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to amputate the parts of your life that are rotting, even if they share your DNA. True wealth isn't the number in your bank account. It is the peace of mind that comes from knowing you are surrounded by people who love you for who you are not, what you can give them. Never set yourself on fire just to keep ungrateful people warm. If you have ever had to make a tough choice to protect your own peace, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice. Let me know in the comments. Would you have opened that door for Nia?